Welcome to the final part of this React.js monster class. So in this course, we cover almost every single thing that you can think about React.js. So what have we covered so far and what are we going to be covering in this course? So in the first part of this course, we cover React fundamentals. We also cover React hooks. We also cover React with TypeScript. We also cover UI component libraries. We also cover React Hook Form, and finally we cover the entire React 19 features. And if we combine all of them, that was 13 hours of content. Then in the second part, we cover every single thing about the framer motion and also animations in general. We also cover React with Zustand for smaller state management. We also cover React with Redux Toolkit for larger state management. We also cover React with RTK query for advanced data fetching. So to combine all of that, there was 11 hours of content. Then in the part 3, we cover React design patterns, we cover React with 10-stack query, JavaScript unit testing, and also every single thing about the React testing. And if we combine all of that, there was 10 hours of content. And now comes the best part, like what you can expect from this video, the video which you are currently watching right now. So in the fourth part, we are going to be covering React design system. We are going to be also building a complete design system in Figma. We are going to be also covering React with Storybook, also React with Style Dictionary, React with CLSX, React with CVA like the class variance authority, and then we are going to be building a complete component library from scratch, and we're going to be using tools like CLSX, Tailwind Merge, CVA, React Storybook, and we're going to be also testing our component library by using testing tools like VTest and also React testing library. After that, we are going to be jumping into the Yarn Mono repos, and we are going to be covering a lot about the Yarn workspaces and so much more. And then finally, we are going to be creating a complete design system for a company. Okay, that's gonna be a lot of fun. And in this part, we are going to be combining every single thing that we learned so far, and we are going to be applying that to build our own complete design system for a company. And then there is a bonus part where we are going to be covering a MERN stack complete authentication system. And basically the point of this MERN stack is to show you how we can communicate with React.js and also with backend technologies. If you want to skip that section, you can totally skip there. You don't even have to watch there. You can complete my backend series, then you can come back to that MERN authentication. Before you jump into the content of this course, I want to preface this by saying like this is not a beginner's course. You have to have, I know a lot of people will hate me about this one, but you have to have at least 2 years of experience, then you would be able to watch this video. If you have less than 2 years of experience in React.js, you are not welcome to watch this course. And I know I'm not gonna get a lot of views on this video because there are not a lot of engineers who are watching my course, but anyways, that was a huge journey and I'm super happy that it was now done. I did my best. And by the way, if you want to follow me here and there, so I have my Instagram account which is Hussein Shorts, and also if you want to follow me on X or Twitter, you can use my handle which is Hussein WebDev, and all of the links will be available in my description, so you can just click on there and it's gonna redirect you there. Anyways, thank you so much for being here with me in this entire journey. And that was a lot of fun that I was making this course, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Let's get into it. So what is a design system? There is no actual definition to what a design system is, and why is that? That's because if you ask a designer, they will say it's a UI kit or it's a color palette or typography, grid or iconography. But if you ask a developer, they will say it's a component library, style guides, or some sort of a documentation. But the truth is, a design system is all of that, a little design and a little engineering. So what do I mean by that? Well, according to Google, a design system is a comprehensive set of standard guidelines and components that ensure consistency and cohesion in the design and development of a digital product. It serves as a shared language and resource for design teams, developers, and other stakeholders to create a cohesive user experience across various platforms and products. So that was a bit weird definition of what a design system is, but now to put that as simple as possible, you can think about the design system as like a toolkit for building a digital products. It includes everything you need to make sure the design is consistent and looks the same across different screens or pages. Now let's talk about the basic components of a design system. The first one we have is a design principle, and it's a high-level guidelines or philosophies that inform design decisions like simplicity, accessibility, or usability. The second one is a UI component, and they are a reusable element such as buttons, forms, modal, navigation bar, and other common interface element, often designed with responsiveness and accessibility in mind. Third one we have is a patterns, and they are repeated design solution to common problems such as card, layout, grid or drop down menus, and so on. Next we have is a style guide, and they are a collection of visual design rules such as typography, color palette, and there are a lot of them which we are going to be covering in this course. Next we have a branding. They ensure the design system aligns with the company brand identity, tone, and value. Then we have a documentation, and they are a clean instruction and best practices on how to use a component and pattern correctly, as well as how to maintain the system overall time. And then we have a code, which is everyone's favorite topic. So for technical consistencies, this includes front-end code like component or UI framework such as React components or CSS frameworks that developer can integrate into their application, something which we are going to be building by ourselves. The final piece of the puzzle we have is accessibility, and they are recommendation for creating a product. They are usable by people with disabilities, ensuring that the design system support compliance with accessibility standards as well. So now let me give you a practical example of a design system. So let's say you are building a shopping app for a brand, and you want everything like buttons, colors, fonts, iconography, layout, and so much more to look consistent across the app. A design system would help you achieve this. So how that's gonna look like? Well, in your design system, you would already have your colors like gray, gray alpha, blue, red, amber, green, teal, purple, pink, and so much more, something which we are going to be covering in this course. So you would already have your colors. You would also have different typography like different fonts which you are going to be using inside your app. Also, you would have different icons for your brand. Finally, you would also have different components which you can use inside your design system. So now that you have every single thing set up inside your design system, now you just have to grab it and use it inside your app. That's it. So now your app will look consistent and it will match the design system. So that was it about the theory of design system, and now we are going to be building a design system in Figma. And that's going to be a lot of fun. But before we jump into this section, I want to preface this by saying if you are not a designer, you can definitely skip this section, but hear me out. If you are working for a company or a super new company, they will ask you to build a design. They will ask you to design a design system for them. That's the first thing. Secondly, if you are building your own company just like I have, then you would need to design your design system inside Figma or some other tools. So that's the only reason I'm including this Figma design system in this course, because I know this is not a designing course, this is an advanced React.js course. So you shouldn't be watching there. If you want to skip this section, you can definitely go ahead and just skip this section. You don't even have to watch there. But for those who are interested in building a design system in Figma, this is what you have to do. The first thing that you have to do is that you have to just download a figma.com, or you can just use the inside your browser by just clicking on this icon and then provide your email, and there you go. And if you want to download there, you just have to search like Figma download, and here the first link will bring you to the download page. So you can install or download there for macOS. You can also download there for Windows and so much more. So if you're a Windows user, you can just click on this download app for Windows, and that's gonna be it. Okay, so I already downloaded there and I already sign in because I've been using Figma for about 3 or 4 years now. So yeah, I already set up every single thing, and this is how the interface should look like. I'm now hiding these stuff because you don't supposed to see them. So what you have to do is that you have to just go ahead and click on this create new, and they change this layout again and again. If you're watching this course in the future, you should definitely check out like some tutorial about the Figma or something like that. Okay, so I'm gonna just click on this design file, and here you can see it's gonna give us this new design file. I'm gonna rename that to my small design system or something like that. Okay, so now let's begin our design system. But before I do that, I want to mention one thing, that we are not going to be building the biggest design system in the planet Earth or something like that. We are going to be just creating a simple portion of that. So what do we have to do? The first thing that we have to do is that we have to decide the colors. Come on, the colors which we are going to be using inside our design system. Secondly, we have to generate a style for those colors. And thirdly, we have to convert those style colors to our variables. There we go. So these are the three things that you have to keep in mind. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to decide a color for our design system. Then we have to generate a style for that, and finally we have to convert that to the variable. So now let's start from the first one, like decide the colors which you are going to be using inside your design system. And there are a few resources that I want to share with you. But I want to say, like, I am not sponsored by any of these companies. They are just a few websites that I personally like. If you want to use that, you can. If you don't want to use that, you don't have to. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just, first of all, you have to go to the COOLORS, and I am not going to provide the links of them in the description. Why? Well, I just don't like to. If you want to go to there, you can. If you don't want to go there, you don't have to. So COOLORS.co, that's the first website. Just click on this button, and once you do that, here you can see it's going to generate a lot of colors for you. And yeah, here you can see they're already sponsoring some other companies and dumb shit like that. Yeah, just hit space every time and it's gonna give you a lot of colors. And yeah, that's the first website that I want to show you. And the second website is this canva.com, and I can totally guarantee, like, you guys probably know this one. And you can, here you can choose different kind of color combinations and stuff like that. So that's the second place for colors. Yeah, you can definitely just upload some sort of an image and it's going to just extract a few colors from there. And you can also go to this color.adobe.com. Probably you've heard about this one before. You can just go to the explore and you can explore different colors. If you like some palette, you can just download that, or you can just copy that or store that inside your library or something like that. That's the third place. And the fourth place is this Canva. Once again, Canva. Okay, so that's gonna be just for one time. You can explore colors or different combination inside this Canva. Yeah, there are a lot of colors. The final place that I really like is this color hunt, because it has a lot of flavors to choose from. So let's suppose if you want to create some sort of a golden design system, so you can just click on there and it's going to give you a golden color right here. If you want to choose some dark, just like Versailles, you can just click on there and it's going to give you Versailles kind of colors. And if you want to choose cold, so it's going to give you cold color. If you want to choose summer or fall, happy, or kids sky, there are a lot of them. Let me just choose this kids one, and it's taking a lot of time, but yeah, these are the color for the kids. So now that you know where to find the colors, now you have to generate a style for your colors. So I'm going to just remove that from, I'm going to hit O, so it's going to give us ellipse tool. There we go. And now I'm going to just create a few portion of this. So then I'm going to hold Alt and Shift and duplicate the one time, and now I'm going to just do the hit Control D, so it's going to duplicate the 3, 4, 5 and 6. So I'm going to just duplicate that like 6 times, and now you can just click on there, then go to this fill and choose your favorite color inside there. So let's suppose if you like this color, or maybe you like some sort of a red color, you can definitely provide there. But for this code, I already selected a color palette. You may not like it, but I like it. Okay, so I'm gonna also name them. You know, let me just name them. I'm gonna give it the name of like primary. Come on, primary. I'm going to just choose this one, that one, and put that right here. So that's going to be my primary color. Now I'm going to just move them around. Come on, what the hell? I'm going to just move them around, and this one will be neutral color. Now let me create one more. So I'm going to just duplicate that, put that right here, and we're going to be also creating a color or generating a color for our warning. Next let's just create for the danger. So I'm gonna just change that to like danger, and this is going to be my danger color. And now finally, not finally, but we still have 2 more left, so I'm gonna just change that to success. And now finally we have to create one more for the grayscale. SCALE, there we go. And now I'm going to just provide my hexadecimal values. If you have your own color already selected, you can just specify there. But in my case, I'm going to just only provide my color. So now let me go ahead and just choose this one. And the first color that I have is #14F0D6. So that's going to be my primary color. Then for the neutral, I'm going to just use this color, which is #142EF0. Hit enter. So that's going to be my neutral color. For the warning, I'm going to choose this color, which is 1DDB70E. That's going to be my warning color, kind of a yellowish color. For the danger, we are going to be using this reddish kind of color, which is our hash FE0140. For the success, we are going to be using this color, which is a hash 71EF014. Hit enter. So that's going to be my success color. And finally, for the grayscale, we are going to be just using this one, which is a hash 7D8C8B. So that's going to be my grayscale color. Okay, cool. Now we have to create a palette for our color. So I'm going to just choose this second icon. Yeah, you just have to hit F. So it's going to give you this frame one. And just like grab it how much you like. And now inside there, we're going to be defining our color palette. Now I'm going to hit R. So it's going to give us this rectangular icon right here, or this rectangular tool. I'm going to just define there right here, and I'm going to duplicate the 11 times. So I'm going to hold Alt and Shift, and then we are going to be duplicating there 1 time, 2 time, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and let me just create there for the final time, which will be the 11th time. And now let me make that a bit bigger so you guys can see everything a bit better. I'm gonna also make it a bit smaller because yeah. And I'm gonna name the as primary. So let's just name the primary. Now we are going to be also providing the opacities today. So I'm going to just hit T. So it's gonna activate my text tool, and I'm gonna just rename that to like 50. I'm gonna make it a bit smaller, like so. I guess that's gonna be fine. Now let me just duplicate there. So the next one we would have is like 100, then 200, 300. Let me just activate there, change it to 300. Then we have a 400 variation. Let's just change there to 400, 500. Change this one to 600, 700, 800, 900. Come on. 900, and then 950. Let's just change that to 950. There we go. Now that we successfully selected our color and we also define our palettes, so now we are going to be duplicating there for the neutral color, for the warning, danger, success, and grayscale. So I'm going to just choose there, hold Shift and Alt, and then click on there and duplicate there once again. Change there to like neutral, and I'm gonna also duplicate there one more time. Change there to warning. So let's just change that to warning, and I'm going to also duplicate there one more time. And what was the danger, success, and grayscale? So danger, next we would have is a success. Change there to success, and finally we are going to be creating for the grayscale as well. So let's just create a grayscale, and that's done. So now that we successfully created our palette, the next thing that we have to do is that we have to go to this website, which is a tints.dev. Now I'm going to hit enter right here, and now I'm going to just copy this hexadecimal from the primary. I'm going to copy there, and now let me just place there right here, and as soon as I do that, it's going to give us all of that variations right here. You can take a screenshot of there. Let me just show you there. So if you're using a Windows, so you can just take a screenshot of there. Now let me take a screenshot, save that inside my desktop, and I'm going to just rename that to like colors or something like that. And now I'm going to grab that right here inside my design tool, and now I can just select my element, and I can hit I and then choose my color from there. That's the first way I can choose these colors, but this is not efficient way because the hexadecimal code will be changed. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just delete that from here. I'm going to undo there. Let's just undo there, and I'm going to just delete there. The second way is to waste a bit of your time and just copy this hexadecimal. So I'm going to just fast forward the video right now. I'm going to copy that. Let me just show you this first one, and then for these next, I'm going to just fast forward this video. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this first one, copy there. Now let me just choose the first one, and then I'm going to place it right here. Copy the second one, place there right here. Third one, place there here. Fourth one, select there and place it right here. For the fifth one, which is this 400 variation, I'm going to choose there and place it right here. Then for the sixth one, copy there, place. I know I'm taking a bit of your time because this is important, and I'm going to fast forward the video for the next one, so maybe it will confuse some of the people. So I'm going to have to just do the like copy and place there, and you have to bear with me. Please bear with me. I'm going to just choose there. I wish I had a lot of time to tell you a story about my ex, like how she cheated on me and how she left me, but I don't have a lot of time, and we are now at 2 colors, so there's not a lot of time to explain or the story of my ex, like how she cheated on me. You know what, that's done. Now I'm gonna copy this second color and I'm gonna fast forward there right now. I'm gonna place it here and bang. Okay, so now that's totally done, and it took me a lot of time while I was listening to some John Wick theme music. So now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to create a variation. I mean, like not variation, but now next we are going to be renaming each layer. So here you can see that's going to be the first one. I'm going to just do that for the first one, and now for the next one, I'm going to fast forward the video once again. So that's the first layer. You just have to click on there and then double click on this layer and change that to like 50. Okay, so I'm going to just click on there. The next one, come on, let me just hit escape, click on the next one, and then we have 100. I'm gonna choose this next one. Then we have 200. Then we have a 300. So let's just do that for this one. We have a 400. I'm gonna choose this next one, which is a 500. Then we have a 600. Come on, 700. I wish there was some other way that I can do that very quickly, but this is not a VS Code, baby. This is Figma. So we have to write 800, then 990. 900 and 950. There we go, 950. I'm gonna hit enter right now. So all of these layers are now successfully renamed, and I'm gonna do that for these next one, and you should do the same, but I'm gonna fast forward this video right now. Okay, so that's totally done. Now we are going to be grouping there. So I'm going to just select this first variations, and then I'm going to hold Control or Command R. And once I do that, here you can see it's going to ask us to provide some sort of a name to there. So I'm going to just give it the name of like primary. And now I'm going to hit space and click on this current name. So it's going to choose like primary 950, 900, and 800, 700, and so on and so forth, depending on our layer names. That's the only reason I rename my entire layers to like from starting from 50 through 950. Now I'm going to just click on this rename. It's going to just rename there. Now we are going to be selecting this portion, hit Control R once again, and I'm going to give it the name of like neutral. And then I'm going to just click on there and hit enter. So it's going to rename that right here. Now let's just choose this one and hit Control R, and that's going to be my warning. And now let's just hit space and current name, and that's my current name. Let's just choose this one, hit Control R, give it the name of like danger, and then the current name, choose there. And now for the success, click on the current name, rename there, and finally for the grayscale, hit Control R, and I'm gonna give it the name of like grayscale, and then click on the current name and rename there. So now that we successfully rename every single thing, and every single thing is now successfully organized, and finally we have to make a selection and create styles based on there. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select this one, hit Control or Shift, this one, shift with this one. I'm holding shift and selecting there right here, just like, then hold Control and then forward slash. Okay, and once you do that, here you can see we have a plugins and assets and so on and so forth. I'm going to click on this plugin right here, and I'm going to search for a styler. Just search for a styler and then click on there. And once you click on there, it's going to ask you to like extract a style or generate a style. I'm going to choose this generate style. So let's just click on there. It's going to take a while, and now it's going to give us all of that colors right here. So we have a danger, primary, warning, and all of that colors. So now that we successfully have all of that colors, and now based on these colors, we are going to be creating a variable. So just click on somewhere else, not on the colors, then hit that same command one more time, which is a Control, come on, CTR, and then plus this forward symbol, or what do you guys call that? Okay, so now I'm going to just do that. I'm going to hold Control and hit that forward slash once again, and now I'm going to search for styles to variable. So styles, come on, styles to variable, that, come on, variable. Okay, so here you can see we have this bluish kind of icon, so I'm going to click on there, and here you can see it's going to give us this box right here, and now we are going to be converting there, but I'm going to give it the name of like colors. Maybe I'll just give it the name of colors, and now I'm going to click on convert styles into variables. Let's just click on there. it's gonna convert 65 colors to the variables. So now let's just close there, click on somewhere else, and now I'm gonna click on this icon right here, which is a local variable. So if I click on there, and bang, we have all of our color variables right here. So we have a neutral, we have a grayscale, we have success, and so on and so forth. So these are all the variables that we can use inside our Figma. And that was it about how we are going to be generating our color variables or creating a colors inside our design system. So this is how we are going to be generating our colors. But now let's talk about the number scale and the radius token. So I'm going to close there. I'm going to also remove this text, and now I'm not going to click on anywhere else. I'm going to just click on there, select all of them, and delete them from here because we don't need them anymore. Now let me just click on somewhere else, like maybe this area. Why aren't we getting, oh, there we go. And now if you click on there, here you can see we are now going to be still getting all of our colors right here. So don't worry about that sidebar. So now let me just close there, and now we are going to be creating our number scale. So I'm going to just click on these three dots, and let me just show you how did I just access there. You just have to click on this local variables and click on these icons, and then click on these three dots, and then create a new collections. So I'm going to just give it the name of like number scale. I guess number scale would be fine. And now here I'm going to just choose like create variable. Now here we are going to be choosing a number right here. So now let me just click on there, and here we are going to be defining a few numbers like tiny, extra, extra large, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to start from the first one, which is a tiny, T-I-N-Y, and I'm going to just set there to 2 maybe. I guess that 2 would be fine. Okay, so now I'm going to click on this create variable once again, click on this number once again, change that to like extra small, and unfortunately you have to watch me. I can't fast forward this section because the names are super different. So now let me just click on the create variable once again, and I'm gonna give it the name of like small and change that to 6. Let's just create another number, change that to medium, small, medium, and change that to 8. Click on this create variable, go to the number scale. I'm going to change that to medium and change the value of that to 12. Let's just create another one for the large, L-A-R-G-E, change that to 16. Then create another one for the extra large, change that to 20. And create another one for super large, change that to 24. Let me just create another one for the huge and change that to like 32. And now let me create another one for the gigantic and change that to 40, and the final one will be for the full. Okay, so let's just create a full and provide like 990, or you know what, 99 would be fine. So this is how we are going to be creating our number scale. And now let's create another collection for the radius. So I'm going to once again click on these three dots, then I'm going to choose create collection, and now we are going to be creating another collection for the numbers. And I'm going to start from the XS for the extra small, and which I'm going to click on this icon, and I'm going to set there to extra small. Okay, now let me create another one for the small, just a S, and now I'm going to connect there to small. And now let me create another one for, come on, let's just create there for the medium, and now I'm going to connect there with the medium, not a medium small, but with the medium. Okay, let's just create another one for the large, for the L, and I'm going to connect there with the large. So this is the large. Now we are going to be creating another one for the extra large, and I'm going to connect there with the extra large. Where is there? Oh, there we go. So we have an extra large, and now finally we are going to be creating for the full. And now let's just connect there with the full. There we go. Let's just connect there. So this is how we are going to be connecting there and creating our collection. So now that we have a number scale, which looks something like this, we also have a colors, which looks something like this, and we also have our other collection right here. So now let me just close that. Now our collections are successfully done. And let's suppose if you want to use the inside our design system. So I'm going to just, you know what? I'm going to create a frame even. And now let me just define a few rectangles right here. Let me just make that a bit smaller so you guys can see that. And I'm going to duplicate that like a few times. I'm going to choose this one, and let's suppose if I want to change the radius of there, so I can just go ahead and click on this icon, and here you can see we have a tiny radius, extra small, small, medium, and so on and so forth. Suppose if I want to change that to like I don't know, maybe a large radius, or maybe medium would be fine. So I'm going to just choose medium. So it's going to change that right here. And now let's suppose if I want to change that to the large one, so it's going to change that. I guess I choose large like twice, but now let me click on there and change that to huge. Then I'm going to change that to like gigantic, which looks something like this. And I'm going to also change that to the full. It's going to make that as a full circle. And yeah, we can now play around with that if you wanted to. And now let's suppose if I want to change the color of that. So if I just click on that, now I can just click on this fill. And here you can see we have our libraries. If I click on there, and inside this library we have our grayscale and all of our colors. And now we can choose our color and different variations of them by using this library, which we just created for our design system. Now let me click on there. I'm going to also change the color of them to like something else. Go to the library once again, and we can change that to like warning, and so on and so forth. Now we can create our component. Like let's suppose if I want to create some sort of a button, and we can style there by using our existing design system, and that's going to be it. So I'm going to just define a smaller button like this, which will just say like this is quite like learn more or something like that. I'm going to make that a bit bigger. I'm going to also make it bolder and I'm gonna change the border radius of there. So let's just go ahead and change that to like maybe small would be fine. Yeah, I guess small would be fine. I'm gonna also make that as a success button, or not a success, but this is a learn more button. So this should be some kind of outline button. So I'm going to choose maybe this variation, and I can also change the color of that to like something else. Let me just change that to white, or yeah, I guess that's going to be fine. So yeah, this is how we are going to be defining our design system in Figma. And now we can extract all of that values from this Figma file, and we can use them inside our app. Oh, I was about to close this entire section, but now I realize that I forgot to include one more design token, which is called the opacities. So I'm going to delete that, and now I am not going to click on anything. Let's just click on this local variables once again. And now I'm gonna go ahead and create a new collection for the opacities. So I'll just give it the name of like opacities. If I can just rename that to opacities, there we go. And now let me just click on this create variable, click on the number. I'm gonna start from the first one, which will be opaque, OPAQUE. And that's gonna be set to 100, the complete entire opacity. And now let's just create another one for the semi-opaque, which will be set to 80. And now we are going to be creating another one for the transparent, TRANSPARENT, and which will be set to 50. And I'm going to also create one more for the light transparent, and the value of that will be set to 30. Now for the final one, which will be set to a very transparent, and the value of that will be set to 25, and that's it. And I also forgot to rename this one, which is the radius, I guess. So I'm going to just choose that and change it to radius. Let's just hit enter. And now our design system is complete. I mean, like, not entirely complete, but you can call it complete. So let's suppose if I want to provide some sort of opacities, so which we just created right here. I'm going to define that and change the color of that to like black, complete black. And now I'm going to duplicate that like a few times, like so. I'm going to just click on this one. Now let me go ahead and go to the opacities and click on this local variable, and now I can choose like opaque. If I just choose like opaque or semi-opaque, it's gonna show us this value right here. So if I click on the opaque, which will be set to full 100, I can also change that to like semi-opaque. So semi-opaque is going to change the what do we call it, the opacity of that. I can also change this one to transparent and click on that. It's going to make it transparent. Choose this one, change that to like very transparent. It's going to make it like a bit more subtle. Create that for the final one. Come on, duplicate that right here and just change this value. I'm gonna have to unlink that, and now let me just provide like very transparent right here. So it's gonna make it like very transparent. So yeah, this is how we can use all of that design system values inside our Figma. But now we have to extract all of their values and use inside our design system, which we are going to be creating right now. Alright guys, now we are preparing ourselves for the design system of this course. But before we get into the design system, first of all, we have to learn about something called the storybook. And trust me, you're gonna love this one. And also, before I give you a definition of what a storybook is, I want to mention a few things. You cannot use a storybook for a smaller application, like maybe you are building your own, I don't know, portfolio or just a small application or something like that. Storybook can be useful for a huge enterprise application. It's like suppose you are working with a bigger company, or you want to build your own SaaS application or something like that, then you would be able to use storybook. You cannot use that. I mean, like, you totally can use that, like nobody can stop you from using that, but it will not be that much useful for your small application. So now let me just give you a definition of what a storybook is. So storybook is an open source tool used for developing and testing the UI components in isolation. It allows developer to create a UI components outside of their main application, making it easier to build, test, and showcase individual part of the UI before they are integrated into your overall application. So as I said, this is not a tool that you're going to be using like day to day. And also this is not a tool that you're going to be using there for a smaller application. So it provides a lot of benefits. The first thing it provides is a component isolation. So Storybook lets developer work on the UI component in isolation, meaning you can build and test component without the need to run the entire application. And this helps in focusing purely in the individual component functionality rather than just focusing on the entire application. It also provides something called the visual testing. So it provides a visual interface to view different states of the UI component, such as various configuration, themes, or data inputs, and so on and so forth, something which we are going to be covering in this course. So this helps identify issues with the component visual appearance or behavior early in the development process. It also provides the documentation, and I've seen a lot of developers, they use Storybook just for their documentation, not for anything else, but just for the documentation. So Storybook serves as a living documentation tool for the UI component. You can write stories like individual use cases for each component, and we are going to be also covering the stories in later in this course, and they are automatically displayed in the Storybook interface, something which you're going to be seeing in a few seconds. It's easy to maintain and update documentation as the component evolves. It also provides the support of add-ons, or you can say the extensions. So Storybook has a wide array of add-ons that can help with tasks like accessibility checks, responsive design testing, or adding a control to multiple components state dynamically, something which we are going to be also covering in this course. And now let's talk about the design system. I mean, like, not the actual definition of a design system, but it also helps us with the design system. So Storybook is commonly used in the development of design system, as it helps ensure the components are reusable and adhere to design guidelines. Design teams can also use Storybook as a tool to communicate design specification to developers. So this is also something which we are going to be seeing in this course. So now let's get into the installation of the Storybook. So if you already created your React application by either using the Create React app, or if you use like Vite, so you just have to type that in your terminal like npx sb init. It's gonna just take a bit of time, and it's gonna install Storybook inside your application. So now let's just do that. So here is the official page of the Storybook, and now we are at the version 8. So you know what, let me just show you something. This is how we can develop our component in isolation. This is how we can test our component, and we can also provide a visual testing, and we can also document our component like this, and that's gonna be a lot of fun. So yeah, their landing page is super amazing, super duper amazing. Okay, so I'm gonna go back. Let me just go back and install Storybook inside our application. So I'm gonna copy that from here. Now let me open my terminal. So let's just open there, and I'm gonna zoom in a bit so you guys can see everything a bit better. And by the way, you are not just limited to use React.js. You can use Storybook with Svelte and different projects. So I'll just use like npm create vite at latest and install there right here. So I'll just give it the name of like story demos or yeah, I guess that's gonna be fine. I'll choose React.js with TypeScript. Let's just go into the Storybook demos and install every single thing inside there. And our React setup is now successfully done. I'm gonna open that by using my VS Code, and this is how it looks like. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this public from here. I'm gonna go to the src, remove the assets, app.css. Now let me go ahead and go to my app.tsx file, remove every single thing from there, and I'm gonna just use my RAFCE to create my component. and also remove every single thing from the index.css file as well. So now that we successfully install our React.js, the next thing that we have to do is that we have to initialize our storybook inside there. I'm gonna go there, and here you can see this is how we are going to be initializing or installing Storybook inside our existing project. So I'm gonna just copy there, and now let me just place it right here. So you just have to write like npx storybook at latest and init, or you can just use like this command, which is npx sb init or something like that. You can also use there, but in my case I already copied there from the documentation. So now let me just place there and hit enter. So now it's gonna give us a few folders right here. So I want you to focus on this area. Now let me just provide Y to proceed there, and yeah, it's gonna give us a few folders right here. I guess it's gonna ask us a few questions. First of all, I'm not quite sure about that, but yeah, let's just see. And as you can see, it added this .storybook folder, and it also added these stories right here, something which we are going to be discussing in a few seconds. So yeah, my application is now successfully running, but if you want to run there, I just closed my application. I don't know why, but I just did. So now let me just restart my storybook once again. So let's just delete there, and I'm gonna just restart my storybook by using npm run storybook. So if I just use there, and it's gonna run my storybook right here in a few seconds. And this is how my storybook will look like. So there are a lot of stuff going on. So now let me just explain there. So first of all, it's gonna give us these instructions like what we can do with the storybook, and so on and so forth, and they are talking about the chromatics and so on and so forth. So this is going to be just our instructions. Then we have a few components. So this pattern is called the compound component, which we are going to be seeing in a few seconds, but not right now. So here you can see we have our buttons folder. Now let me just zoom in a bit. Oh, you know what, I'm not. So if I click on there, we have our documentation for our component, like what we can do with this component. Like we can whenever we click on there, what's going to happen, and we have our primary, label, background color, sizes. Like we can change that. Let me just go back. We can change that. So if I change that to like small, so it's going to make this button small. If I click on the medium, so it's going to make it medium. If I click on the large, so it's going to make it large. And we can also change the color of our button like this if you wanted to. And this is also something which we are going to be covering in a few seconds. We can also change the text to be something else. We can also make their disable or enable, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we have our primary button, we have a secondary, large and small buttons. So these are the docs or the documentation for our component. And then we have a few component or a few variation of our component. So if I click on this primary, so it's going to show us this primary, and it also has these controls. So when we click on there, what's going to happen? So this action will happen. And we also have these primary and secondary, and this area is called the control area, where we are going to be controlling the behavior of our component. Okay, so we can also change that to like blah blah blah, and also we can change the color of there, and as we already saw that we can set that to medium or small. Then we have a secondary component which will look something like this. Then we have a large button, small button, and so on and so forth. Then we have a header. Like you are not just limited to create a simple what do we call a simple button component. You can create the entire headers and also the entire pages if you wanted to. So this is how our header component will look like, and we can also provide these documentation for our header component, and we can also see there in action. So if I click on there, and here you can see this is how we can interact with our component. And there are a lot of stuff. So yeah, I'm just saying like you are not just limited to style your button component, or you can also provide the header. You can also even provide your entire pages. Like as you can see right here, this is the entire page that you can test, and you can also visualize there inside the storybook. And now if I click on there, once again you can also see there. So where in the world is all of that stuff coming from? Like what are we even doing here? So now let me just hide there, and all of that stuff are now coming from these stories right here. So first of all, we have like all of that assets, like as you saw these screenshots a few seconds ago. So now let me just remove there, and we also have that button. So here you can see we have our button.tsx file. So if I click on there, this is how they created their component, and they provided a bit of styling to there and so on and so forth. But this is how they are now testing their component by using Storybook and also TypeScript. So yeah, and this is how they are creating their header component. This is how they are providing a stories for their header component. This is how they are creating their entire pages. This is how they are creating their entire pages, and this is how they are providing stories for their pages and also their own CSS. If you want to use Tailwind CSS, you totally can. If you want to use like the module CSS, you totally can. You can use anything that you prefer, and Storybook will work for you. So now let me just close there. And what in the world are we going to be even doing? I'm going to just select every single thing, or even this entire stories. I'm going to right click on there and I'm going to delete there. Say bye bye to the stories because now we are going to be creating our own stories. So now let me just click on yes, delete this permanently, and now we are going to be creating or recreating their stories folder from scratch. So I'll use like stories, and now let me just hit enter right here, and inside the stories folder we can just create our components. And yeah, let me just create another components folder right here. So let me just create that stories right here. So I'll just use like button.tsx, and I'll use my RAFCE inside there, save my file, close there, and now we are going to be creating a story file for this button right here. So now if I just create a file, I'm going to give it the same name like button, and then now in this case we are going to be using a stories and then .tsx. So as soon as I do that, here you can see my icon is now successfully changed. So this is how we are going to be creating a stories file for our button component. So now if I hit enter right here, we're going to be doing a lot of magic. But now here I'm going to just write a simplest code. So first of all, we are going to be importing our button component so that we can see there in action. Then we are going to be using export default, and now let's just provide the. And by the way, for now we are not going to be focusing on the TypeScript. We are going to be using TypeScript with Storybook in a few seconds, but not right now, because first of all I want you to focus on the Storybook syntax. Then we are going to be implementing the TypeScript with the Storybook, but not right now. So we are going to be using a title, and I'm going to just give it the name of like title, and I'm going to also provide a comma and provide a component right here. And by the way, we are going to be like learning about all of that coding in a few seconds, and the component we want to see or test will be that button component which we are now importing right here. And finally we just have to export const primary, and it's going to be equals to this arrow function. Now let me just use the button right here and close that. So as soon as I do that, save my file. And now let me just rerun my Storybook once again. So I'm going to be using npm run Storybook, and now it is running. So now let's just refresh there. It's going to give us this error. And why is there? That's because our URL is changed. As you can see, we are now inside this page component which is no longer available. So now let me just remove and hit enter right here. So now it's going to give us that button component by which we are not even providing any styling and nothing today. So here you can see we have our button folder which is now coming from this title right here. So if I just write like my own name, Hussein components or something like that, save my file, here you can see it's going to change the name of that to Hussein components. And now if I expand that, now we are getting this variation or flavor of this component. So where in the world is that coming from? It is coming from this line of code. Now that we learn about how we are going to be creating a button component and how we can create a story file for that, but there is also another folder which is called the .storybook, and inside there we have our main.ts and also preview.ts file. So now let's just explore that. What in the world is this main.ts file, and what in the world is this preview.ts file? So the first one we have is a main.ts file. So the main.ts file is a configuration file used to customize the setup and behavior of the Storybook instance. And here we can configure file locations, add-ons, something which we are going to be covering, webpack configuration, and so much more. The next one that we have is a preview.ts file. So the preview.ts file is another configuration file used to customize the preview aspect of a Storybook. For example, like how the stories are rendered and displayed in the Storybook UI. So that was it about the main and preview files. Now let's talk about the nesting, renaming, and also variation inside the Storybook. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to make this component so that it can take a lot of props. So I'm going to just first of all get my props, and I'm going to also annotate the as any, because we don't know like which kind of props we are going to be taking. So now let me just spread all of their props right here. So now let me just save my file. And now here inside there, let's just talk about the nesting. As you can see, first of all, we have our Hussein components folder, and now inside there we have our primary component variation. I'm going to just change that to products maybe. So I'll just write like, and then if I just write like buttons, and now let me just save my file. Here you can see first of all we have our products folder, and now if I expand that, then we have another folder which will be for buttons. And now if I expand this one, now finally we have our primary button right here, the variation of our button. So yeah, this is how we can provide the nesting for our folders. And yeah, that was it. So if you want to change that to like maybe something else, like I don't know, maybe special, or I guess special would be fine. So now if I save there, now this is our parent folder, but now if I expand there, so this is how our children folder will look like. And now if I even expand there, this is how our component will look like. So yeah, that was it about the nesting. So now let me just remove that from here. And now let's talk about how we are going to be creating a different variation for our button. So like we don't have to copy and paste our component again and again, and we can provide different variation for our component. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove that from here, and now I'm going to be using like button, and now let me just close there like so, and inside there I'll just write like primary. And now let me create a few more variation like a flavor. Whenever I say variation, I mean a flavor of this button. So I'll use like export and then const secondary, and it's going to be equals to this button. And now we are going to be using that button once again. Let's just close there, and we have a secondary button. So now let's just save there. Finally, we are going to be also creating one more. So I'll use like const danger, and it's going to be equals to this arrow function. And now let's just provide our button right here, and I'm going to put my danger inside there. And now we can also provide different props to there. We're going to see that in a few seconds, but now if I just refresh there, here you can see we have our products folder, and now inside there we have our buttons folder. And now inside our buttons we have a few flavors right here. So first of all we have our primary, then we have our secondary, and then we have our danger. So now let's suppose if I want to change like I don't know, maybe the names of them. So how in the world we are going to be doing there? Well, now this button is now accepting all of our props, so now we can successfully provide those props. So I'll just use like I don't know, maybe variant, and it's gonna be equals to like primary. And now I'm gonna also provide the variant here, and that's gonna be it for the secondary. Now let me just provide yet another variant, and that's gonna be set to like danger. So now let's just save our file, and here you can see this is our primary button. If I click on this one, this is our secondary button. And now if I click on this one, so this is our danger button right here. So this is how we can provide or create different variation of our component without just copying and pasting our component. So we just have to take all of their props, and this is how we are going to be providing a different props or values for our component. And this is how we can test them in isolation. Now finally, let's just talk about the renaming, like how we can change the names of our components. So let me just write a comment like renaming stories. I'll just first of all access my primary, and by the way, there are a lot of ways we can do that, but this is just the older way I'm showing you right now. Later in this course we are going to be learning about the arcs and also the archetypes, but we are not there yet, so we're not going to be talking about them right now. So now if I just hit down here, you can see we have a lot of properties, but the one I'm interested in is just a story name. And now I'm going to set that to like some basic random name. So I'll just write like blue button. And now let me just duplicate that like 3 times. And now here we're going to be accessing the secondary story. So I'll use like secondary story. And now let me just change the color or the name of this. So I'll just change that to like green. And I'm gonna also select my danger button, and I'm gonna set that to I don't know, maybe a red button. And now let's just save our file. And here you can see now the labels are successfully changed. So this one is a blue button, then we have a green button, then we have a red button right here. So if I click on there, yeah, everything is still working the way we expect them to work. So if I just change the name of that to like Alex Merson, and if I change this name to I don't know, my own name like Hussein WebDev, and I'm gonna also change this name to Jordan Peterson. Now let me just save my file, and here you can see this is how we are going to be changing the names of our component or variation. So this is how we are going to be creating our folders or subfolders. This is how we are going to be providing a props for our component, and this is how we are going to be renaming our variation of our stories, or you can just say like the stories. There we go. So that was example number 1. So now let me just create another component, and this is going to be my example number 2, and I'll just give it the name of like my input.tsx, and I'll use my RAFC inside there. Let's just remove this element from here. Now it's going to take a props as a perimeter, and I'm going to also annotate the as any. And now here let me just provide my input field. Now we are going to be passing like or spreading out those props. Save this file, and now let's just go ahead and create a story file for that. So I'll just go ahead and create like my input input.stories.tsx and define the story of my life. So I'll just first of all import, what do we call it, my input field. Now underneath there we are going to be exporting default so that we can create our story. And I'll just give it the name of like my input field or inputs here. Let's just, or I'm going to use like input fields, and inside there I'm going to provide like my input. There we go. Provide a comma there, and now we are going to be rendering our component. So I'll use like component my input and save my file. Now underneath there, I'm gonna just go ahead and create a variation of there. So I'll just give it the name of like small input, and here now let's just use our arrow function. Now inside there I'm gonna be using like my input, and here let's just close there, and as you can see it takes all of the props. I'm gonna go ahead and just define like a placeholder prop. It's gonna say like enter your name, and now let's just save our file. As you can see, we have our inputs folder. Inside there we have another folder with the name of my inputs, and now inside there we have a variation of our component. We don't want that, so I'll just remove that, save my file. Now we are getting just one folder, and now inside there we have only one input field. So yeah, that's cool. Now let me just undo that, and let's just undo that once again. I'm gonna remove this inputs from here, and now we are going to be providing a size prop today. So I'll just go ahead and provide the size, and size will be set to like 10 rem. I'm gonna go ahead and go to my component, and here we are going to be passing our size inside the style. Okay, so based on that prompt, we are going to be providing or increasing the width of our component. So I'll use like width, and I'm gonna just access that size property or prop from this props.size. Now let me just save my file and save this file as well. And here you can see we are now getting our small input field right here. But now let's suppose if you want to create like a bigger or intermediate size of those input field, how in the world we are going to be doing that? Well, that's quite simple and easy. We just have to create our variation. So I'll use like export const and then medium input, and it's going to be equals to this arrow function, and inside there let me just pass my input field right here and close there just like that. And I'm going to also pass the size, and the size will be set to 20 rem. And the placeholder, come on, just a placeholder will be set to enter your name. Come on, enter, oh my god, enter your name, god damn it. Save my file once again, and now we have two stories or two variation. So this one will be a small input, and now if I click on this one is a bit larger input right here. And why? That's because we are now providing this size prop today. And now, you know, let me just duplicate that for the final time. Now we are going to be creating our large input. So I'll use like large input, and here let's just pass or 40 rem. Save this file, and now if I click on this large input, and now we are getting this large input right here. That was example number 1, which was about the button, and that was example number 2, which is my input field. So that was example number 2, and now we are going to be discussing something called the combo stories. So like here you can see we have story number 1, which is a button story. Then we also have an input story, and now if you want to combine both of them at once, so for that we are going to be using a combo or a combination story, or you can say a story within another story. So I'm going to just right click on there, and I'm going to create a new file with the name of combo.stories.tsx. And now we have to import those stories which we are going to be combining. So I'm going to just import first of all my large input, and I'm going to also import the primary button. So now let's just combine this. So first of all, we are going to be using export default, and inside there let's just provide some sort of a title, and I'm going to give it the name of like combo. Come on, combo, and components would be fine. So I'll use like components. And now underneath that, if you want to combine both of these components, we are not going to be passing that to our component prop. Instead, we are going to be creating another separate component for that, which will combine both of their components. So I'll just use like export const, and basically you can give it any name that you prefer, but in my case I'm going to only give it the name of like combo. And now let's just return our component from there. So I'll just use like large input, and I'm going to close there. And here we're going to be passing the prop of like placeholder, and I'm going to say like enter whatever you prefer. And I'm going to also provide the primary. So let's just provide that and close this, save my file. It should be, I don't know why we are getting this error, but I'm going to just ignore that for a few seconds. And I'll use npm run not test but storybook. And here you can see we have our combo component, and now if I expand there, we have our combo. So as you can see, we have our input field, and we also have our primary button. So let's suppose if you want to get like, I don't know, maybe secondary or maybe some other input field like medium one. So I'm going to copy the name of that. Let's just first of all import that and place it right here. And here you can see we are now getting our medium input, and we are also getting our primary button right here. Now let's talk about the args in Storybook. So args are essentially a way to define the values of a prop that are passed to a component in your story. So they allow you to control the component interactivity. They also allow you to share common props across the story, and they also allow you to document your component props. So this was the older way of creating a variation for our component and also passing a prop to our component. So what is the newer way? Well, the newer way will look something like this. First of all, we are going to be using export, then const. We will still able to give it any name that we prefer. And now we are not going to be providing a function. We are going to be only providing an object. And now inside this object, we are going to be providing something called the args. And they will allows us to pass prop to our component. Also, they will allows us to control the behavior of our component, and also we can document our component. So I'll just provide like primary, and I'm going to set that to true. And I'm going to also provide another prop which will be set to label, and I'm going to also provide like label of button. And finally, I'm going to also provide the on click, like when somebody clicks on there. So we just want to fire this function which will not do anything, but it's going to just console log like you clicked me or something like that. And here you can see this is the newer way of creating a variation for our component. And you know what, let me just go ahead and go to my button. And now first of all, we have to destructure a few things from there. So I'm going to just remove this. So we are going to be destructuring the label which we are now providing right here. We would also need to destructure the primary, and I'm going to also provide the initial value of false today, and also the on click event handler. So now let me just save my file. Now it's going to give us a lot of errors because we also have to provide a type for that. So I'll use like button props, and now I'll provide first of all the label. Let me just provide an equal to sign right here. That's going to be a string. We are going to be also providing a primary, and primary will be set to a boolean, and it should be totally optional. And when somebody clicks on there, so we also want to just provide a void for the void. There we go. And this is going to be also totally optional. So now let me just copy there from there. Now let me place there right here, just like that. Now let me save my file, and this is how our component looks like. But now we have to use those props. So I'll just go ahead and create my button and close there. And here let me just render first of all my label. And now I'm gonna also provide the on click event handler. And now let me just copy this prop from there, paste it right here. And now we are going to be also providing some sort of a style. And let's just do that. So I'm going to provide the background color property, and if this is set to primary, which we are now setting there to false, if our prop is set to primary, in this situation we are going to be changing that to blue. But if that's not the case, we want to set that to gray. And also I'm going to provide a bit of color, and color will be set to totally white. And also padding will be set to 10 pixel, and also border will be set to totally none, like that. And finally the border radius will be set to only 5 pixels. So now let me just save my file, and now let me go ahead and go to my components. There we go. And now let me click on the buttons, and here you can see now we are getting this button. And now I know a lot of you will ask me like, Hussein, nothing just happened. And yeah, you are right. And I want you to go ahead and just click on this icon, or you can just hold Alt and hit A. So it's going to open this test area for you, or control area to be precise. So now let me just close there. If I click on there once again, I can also move that to the right, and I can also move that to the bottom right here. So as you can see, these are the control for our component. Like I'm now providing a primary, and I can totally set that to false or true, and based on this primary prop, I can now visually see the behavior of my component. And I can also provide the label, and this label can be basically anything. So I can just write like something else. And also if I click on this button, so here you can see, now let me just go ahead and go to my inspect element, go to my console, let's just refresh there, click on this button once again, and here you can see we are now getting that you clicked me right here. So yeah, this is how we are going to be controlling the behavior of our component by passing args to there. So that was just a bit simple example. Now let me give you a bit difficult example. So now let me go ahead and go to my story once again. So now that we provided a primary, the label, and also the on click, and now let me just change the to alert so that we can see that on the screen. So that's looking better. I'm going to also provide the loading state to that. So now let me just go ahead and provide a loading, and loading will be now set to false. And I'm going to also provide the size, and the size will be set to medium. And also I'm going to provide the color, and color can be this color. So I'm going to use like 007 BFF. I'm going to also provide a comma there and provide my full width, and that's going to be set to false initially. And we are going to be also providing even the icon. So I'll use like FA home. So now let me just install the React library so that we can get this font. So I'm gonna go ahead and, let me just stop there. So I'll just stop there right here, and I'm gonna use npm I and then React icons. Was that React icons? I'm not quite sure, but now let me just install that. Yep, it is React icons. I hope so. Yep, it was. So now that's successfully done. I'm gonna use npm run storybook once again. It's gonna start there. Now we have to import there, so I'm gonna go ahead and just import this font from our React icons. So let's just import that right here. So it's going to import there at the top. And now here, I'm going to paste the icon position and let's just set that to left. And I'm going to also provide the area label. Here, let's just provide a primary button. Now let me just save my file. So this is how we are going to be providing a different prompts for our component. And now let's just use them inside our button component. So now let me go ahead and go there. And the first thing that I want to do is that I want to just remove this type and I'm going to replace that with this new interface. So here you can see we have our button interface. And now we are providing a label, the on click, primary, disable, loading, size, color, full width, icon, icon position, and area label. So if you want to provide that, you definitely can. But if you are not using TypeScript, you don't have to. Now let me go ahead and remove all of these stuff from here. And now I'm going to just destructure the label, the on click event handler, the primary, and I'm going to set that to false. And the loading, and I'm going to also set that to false. Size will be set to medium as initial value. And I'm going to also provide, and full width will be set to false initially. And we are going to be also getting that icons and also the icon position and the area label, and that's going to be it. So now let's just save our file, and this is how it looks like. So now that we already use these stuff, now let's just also use these. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove every single thing from this component. Let's just remove there, and now here let's just provide our button, save our file, and this is how it looks like. And now we are going to be creating a few classes. So I'll use like const button class, and it's going to be equals to this backticks, and inside there, first of all, we are going to be providing a class, and now we have to render that other class is totally dynamic. So now let me just render there right here totally dynamically. So I'll just provide their primary, which you are now getting from these props right here. So if that is primary, so in that situation we want to just provide like button primary color, which we are going to be providing in a few seconds. But if that's not the case, we are going to be providing like button in secondary, and this should be double dashes because we already set there inside our styling, which you are going to be seeing in a few seconds. Now let me also provide the size. So if you are getting the size, so in this situation we want to change that to a button and then dash dash, and here let's just render our size from our props right here. Okay, so if that's not the case, so in that situation we're going to be just rendering like dash dash and also the medium button right here. Also, we are going to be working with the colors. So now let's just get the colors. If we have there, in this situation we are going to be using like button dash dash custom color. And if that's not the case, then we're not going to be providing nothing at all. And also let's just render our full width. If we got the full width, so in this situation we are going to be using button dash dash full width like this. But if that's not the case, we are going to be setting there to totally empty string. And also finally we have to provide the loading state. So if you are getting some sort of a loading state, in that situation we are going to be just writing like dash dash loading, and if that's not the case, we are going to be setting there to empty string. So now let me just save my file, and now let's use these button classes inside our button. I'm gonna go ahead and go to my button right here, and first of all I'm going to provide those classes. So I'll just use like classes, remove there, and provide my button classes. And outside from there, when somebody clicks on this button, then we want to just provide that other prompt, which will be that on click prompt. So I'm going to copy there and place it right here. And also on the area label, area label, like so, we're going to be providing our area label, which are also destructuring. And also for the styling, let me just save that right here. I'm going to also provide a styling. So if we got the color, in that situation we are going to be changing the background color to something else. So I'll just use like background color, and now let me just provide like color right here. And also the text color will be set to totally white. But if that's not the case, then we're not going to be providing nothing today. So now let me just save my file. So this is how we are going to be providing our prompts. Now let me go ahead and go inside this button, and first of all let's just take care of that loading state. So if we got the loading state, in that situation we are going to be creating our span. Come on, what the hell was that? So let's just create our span, and I'm going to provide like loading dot dot dot, and I'm going to also provide a class name to this. So I'll just use like button and then loading spinner. But if that's not the case, then we're not going to be getting nothing at all. And here let's just also take care of that icon. So if you got the icon, in this situation we're going to be providing the icon position, and if that is set to left, so in that situation we are going to be setting that icon to the left side of the button. So I'll just go ahead and use like the span, and now let me just provide those icon right here. just like that. And I'm going to also provide the class name, which will be set to button and then icon. And now let me just save that. But if that's not the case, then we are going to be also providing our label. And here let's just render our label, which we are now destructuring from our props, and provide my class name, which will be set to button and then dash dash label. And by the way, I'm now providing these classes, and you also have to do that because we are going to be copying and placing a few CSS classes. So that's the only reason I'm now providing these what do we call it, these classes right here. So we are going to be essentially working with the CSS styling for a bit. Okay, so now finally let's just provide our icon to the right. So if we have like icon, and also our icon position is equal to the right, so which means like we are going to be pushing that icon to the right. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and provide my span. Come on, let's just provide our span right here, and I'm gonna just render my icon, and we are going to be also providing a class name of button and then dash dash icon. There we go. Let's just save our file. Now that we successfully created our button, the next thing that we have to do is that we have to provide a styling for that. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my stories, and let's just zoom in a bit. I'm going to create a new file with the name of style.css, and here let's just render all of our CSS right here. And you can find all of that CSS in my GitHub repository. So first of all, we are just selecting our button. We are providing a display of inline flex, and also the items will be set to center, justify center. Padding on the x-axis will be set to 10 pixel, on the y-axis will be set to 20 pixel. Then we have a border radius, font size, cursor will be set to pointer. We are also providing a bit of transitions today, and the position will be set to relative. Then we have our primary button, which we are now styling like this. Then we have a secondary button, which we are now styling like this. And finally, we have a full width, and which will be set to totally 100%. And then we also have our button loading, which is now initially set to relative. The position is set to relative, and now we are also providing our loading spinner, and we are just setting there at the middle. And also we have a margin icon. We are now providing a margin right to there. Then we have a label. Also we have button small, button medium, and button large. So that's our styling. And if you want to provide there, you can definitely go ahead and go to my GitHub repository. And now I'm going to go to the top of my button component. Let's just import those stylings. So I'll just go ahead and use like style.css, save our file, and the moment of truth. Okay, so let's just refresh there. Oh, I guess we lost connection. No, we didn't. Let's just check this out. Here you can see we have only one flavor of our button, which is a primary. But now if I click on this icon, here you can see now we can successfully control the behavior of our component. So here you can see it is initially set to primary. If I click on there, so it's going to make it is no longer set to primary. If I click on there once again, it's going to just remove those borders. So I can also change the label of that to like button or something like that. And when somebody clicks on this button, so it's going to give us that alert like you clicked me. And also we have a loading spinner. If I click on this, so it's going to give us that loading text right here. And now let me just close there. If you want to change the size of this button, like if you want to see like how our button will look like, I can click on this small, so it's going to make it small. I can click on the medium, it's going to make it medium. I can also click on the large, it's going to make it large. I can also change the color of my components, so I'll just use like some other color. And here you can see it's going to reflect the back. And also we can make our button totally full width. If I click on there, bang, it's going to make it full width. If I click on there once again, so it's going to make it normal. And then we have our icon, which we are now providing right here. And we can also change the position of this icon. So this is now initially set to left, but we can also push there to the right. And we can see like how our component will look like if we set the icon to the right. So now let me just click on there, and this is how it's going to look like. And yeah, we can also provide the area label, which is just for the accessibility. So I'll just write like something cool. Come on, something cool. And yeah, we can also make their disable if you wanted to. So if I click on this set boolean, now it's going to give us like false. If I click on there, it's going to make it disabled right here. You cannot see there because I already provided styling today, but it's going to make it disabled. So this is how we are going to be testing our component or the UI of our component in isolation. Now that we've seen arcs, let's talk about the archetypes. So archetypes are used to define and control how the props or arcs, which we just saw a few seconds ago, of a component are displayed and interacted with inside the Storybook UI. And they provide a metadata about the arcs and allows us to specify how each prop should behave in the controls panel, something which we are going to be seeing in a few seconds, which is a part of a Storybook UI. Okay, so now let me show you those archetypes in action. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove this primary variation from here, and I'm going to define my own one. So let's just also remove this FA icon or FA home from there. So I'm going to just use like export const primary, and it's going to be equals to this object, and now inside this object we are going to be defining our args. So now inside this arg, now let me just provide a few args like label. So label will be set to click me, and also let me just provide a comma there. Okay, now we are going to be also providing a background color today, which will be essentially our prompts. So I'll just use like 007 BFF. I'm gonna also provide the size, and size will be set to medium initially, and provide the border radius, and it's gonna be set to 4. I'm gonna also provide the font size, and font size will be set to 16 pixel initially, and also the text color will be set to totally FFF, like totally white color. And now if I save my file, and I'm gonna also go ahead and go to my button and remove every single thing from there, and I'm gonna use my RAFC right here. I'm gonna also remove the style.css from there because we're not gonna be using that anymore. And now here, what do we have to do? Well, we're not going to be doing anything not right now. First thing first, we have to restructure all of those prompts which we just defined. So I'll just restructure the label, the background color, the size, border radius, text color. Now let's just save there. I'm going to also define an interface for that so that we can use our TypeScript. So I'll use like interface, and I'll use like button prompts, and here inside there, I'm going to use my label, and label will be set to string. I'm going to also provide the background color, and background color will be set to string. The size will be set to either small size, small size, or medium size, or large size. And now underneath there, we are going to be providing our border radius. It's going to be set to a number initially. I'm going to also provide the font size there, and font size will be set to string, and provide my text color, and text color will be set to string. I'm going to copy the name of there and annotate my component with those prompts. So let's just annotate this, our file. Now we have to create our own size styles. So I'll use like size styles, and inside there I'm going to provide first of all the small, and small will be set to 5 pixel and 10 pixel for the top and bottom. And also I'm going to provide the medium, and medium will be set to 10 pixel and also 20 pixel in this case. And then we are going to be providing our large, and large will be set to 15 pixel and 30 pixels. So now let's just save our file. Now let me go ahead and go to my UI and remove them from here, and change there to the button, and render my label inside there. I'm going to also provide my style. Now for this style, we are going to be providing our background color. I'm going to also provide the padding, and padding will be set to the size style which we also defined a few seconds ago, and we are going to be rendering our sizes inside there. Let's just provide our border radius, and for this border radius, we are going to be rendering our border radius and then pixel, that much pixel percent. And we are going to be also providing a font size, and font size will be set to font size which is coming from the prompts. And finally, let's just set the color, and color will be now set to text color. I'm gonna go back, and this is how my component looks like. So now let's just refresh there, go to my products, and then I'm gonna go into my component. And yeah, you can see like we are now getting all of the results right here, and everything is working the way we expect them to work. But now let's use our archetypes right here. Here you can see this is how we are going to be passing our prompts for our component. But now we want to tell our storybook like how each prompt will look like. So here you can see we are now passing like background color, and now we are providing some sort of a specific color today. But we want to tell our storybook that we want you to use this value as our initial color, but we also want you to provide our color picker so that we can choose those color from for our component. Okay, so how in the world we are going to be doing there? This is how we are going to be doing there. So first of all, we have to just write like archetypes, and inside these archetypes we can now specify our color picker and so on and so forth. So I'll just select my background, background color, and I'm gonna set that to the control, and the control will be set to color. And now if I save there, now let me just refresh there, and here you can see now we can totally select this color picker, and we can change the values from here just like that. So this is how we are going to be essentially providing our archetype for our prompt. And not only there, here you can see we have our our size, so we can also provide different sizes for there. So I'll use like size, and here inside this size I'm going to provide the control and the not continue but control. So let's just use the control, and the control control will be set to select state. You want to get the select statement right here. You can also provide the options, and here let me just provide those options, like we can have a small button, and we can also have the medium button, and we can also have the large button. And now let me just save my file, and as you can see it's going to change this type. So now we can get like the small button, the medium button, and also the large button right here just like that. So that's also cool. Now let me also select this label which we are now providing right here, and we can also customize there by using our arc props. So I'll just use like the label, and here inside this label I'm going to provide that control, and control will be set to text. I'm going to also provide a bit of description for the description, and it's going to be set to like text displayed on the button or something like that. And not only that, we can also change the border radiuses if you wanted to. Like here you can see we're now specifying this border radius, and now we can also change this. So I'll just go ahead and provide my border radius, which we are also providing right here. So I'll use like border radius, and inside this border radius I'm gonna first of all provide the control. So let's just do there, not continue but control, and the control will be set to number. And also let's just provide like the minimum value is going to start from 0, the maximum value is going to go through 50, and for the step we only want to provide like 1. And yeah, I guess that's going to be fine. So now let me just save my file. Now let me just refresh there, and here you can see we're now getting this input field, and now we can totally change there like so. Okay, so now if I just write like 30, it's gonna make it 30. If I just write like 40, it's gonna make it 40. If I just write like 10, it's gonna make it 10. So yeah, this is how it's gonna look like. And what it should be just a border radius in lowercase border radius. Now let me save my file, and now this is looking better, and we can do a lot of stuff with them, but I guess that's going to be fine. So this is how we are going to be just providing our archetypes. And now inside the archetypes we can just specify our prop, and then we can provide different behavior for our prop, like for the size, and also for the label, for the border radius, and so on and so forth. So now let me just create another variation of that. Like I don't have to, but I wanted to, and I'm gonna give it the name of like secondary. And here you can see we have our secondary button right here, and we can do all of that stuff with this button as well, just like that. Now let's talk about perimeters in Storybook. So what are perimeters, and why should you even care about that? And I can't even pronounce that word, like perimeters. So perimeters will allow you to change the look and feel of your Storybook. Like here you can see we have this button right here. If you want to put this button at the middle of the screen or at the center of the screen, so how in the world we are going to be doing there? Also, if you want to change the color of our background, like here you can see if I click on there, I can choose light, I can choose dark. And also if you want to change like this control settings, you can also do there. So how in the world we are going to be doing all of that? Now let me just show you. So the first thing that you have to do is that you have to write a parameters, parameters, and now inside there what do we have to do? We have to provide our options. So first of all, I'm going to just write the layout, and I'm going to make that as a centered. And now let me just save my file. Here you can see our button will now jump to the middle or at the center of the screen. So that's the first thing. Now let me also show you like how in the world we are going to be providing a label or a description and all of that kind of stuff for our control panel. So this is how we are going to be doing there. I'm going to just write like the controls, and here inside these controls I'll provide my expanded. So I'll write like expanded, and I'm going to set that to true. And as soon as I do that and save my file, and here you can see it's going to also give us their description and also this default values right here. So we already provided this description like text displayed on the button, as you can see if I show you there. Okay, there we go. So displayed, I'll write like displayed, and now let me just save my file, and here you can see this is how it's going to look like. And also, let's suppose if you want to change the background color to like something else, we can totally do that. So now let me just hide there once again, and here we just have to provide our backgrounds. So I'll use like backgrounds. We can provide the default value, so I'll just write like the default, and the default will be set to light. And we can also provide our own values if you wanted to. So I'll just write like first of all the name, and the name will be set to light, and I'm going to provide the value to there. So let me just go out from there, and the value will be set to totally white. So now let's just save our file, and here you can see we already have this light. Now let me make that a bit smaller so that you guys can see everything a bit better. And now I'm going to provide a few more colors. So let's just provide the dark one. I'm going to even duplicate that and change the name of that to like dark, and I'm going to also change the hex value of that to like 333. Save our file, click on there once again. We can now change that to dark. We can also change that to like sky blue or green or something like that. I'm going to place all of that colors in a few seconds, but now let me just write this. I'll use like sky blue, and I'm going to just provide the hexadecimal value of this. I'll use like 00BCD4. And now let me just save my file. And now if I click on there, here you can see we have our sky blue. If I click on there, it's going to change the background color of the And now I'm gonna just remove these values and I'm gonna replace them with my own one. And if you care about these values and these colors, you can definitely go ahead and go to my GitHub repository and grab all of that colors from there. So now let me just refresh there, click on there once again, and here you can see we have a lot of colors. We have a hot pink, I can choose there. We have like, I don't know, we have a peach and so much more. So yeah, this is how we can use the parameters to change the look and feel of our storybook. Now let's talk about the decorators in Storybook. So decorators are a function that are applied globally or locally to our stories, allowing us to wrap or modify the story rendering process, and decorators enable us to add additional functionality, style, context or layout to our stories in a reusable way. So that was just a theory about the decorators, and now let me show you that in action. Okay, so that was just a theory about the decorators. Now let's talk about how we are going to be using them inside our projects. And also we are going to be discussing three kinds of decorators, like the variation decorator, then the local decorator, and finally the global decorator. So now let me just zoom in a bit, and I'm going to just remove that from here and create my folder with the name of stories. Okay, so now inside there, first of all, let me just create my button.tsx file, and I'm going to also create my button.stories.tsx. And now let me go ahead and go to my button, and I'm going to be only using my RAFC inside there. And now let's just go into our story file and import that button right here. So I'll use like button, and let's just import them. And here I'm going to use like export default, come on, default, and inside there let's just provide our title, and that's going to be set to a button, just a button. And also we are going to be providing a components, so let's just provide our component, and we want to test the button component right here. So now underneath there, let's just create our default variation. So I'll use like const default, it's going to be equals to this object, and we are going to be also providing our args, and this args will have the label, and it's going to just say like click me or something like that. We're going to be also providing a specific color to that, so I'll use like 007 BFF. And I'm going to also provide the disable flag, so disabled, and disable will be now set to false. Now let me go back, and now we are going to be creating another variation of our button. So I'm going to just duplicate that, and I'm going to change the name of that to like disable button right here, and I'm going to just give it the name of like disabled. There we go. And I'm going to also make it as a disable so that you guys can see that. Now let me go ahead and go to my component. And first of all, we are going to be destructuring all of their props, and then we would just use this. So I'll provide my label, and the initial value will be now set to like click me or something like that. And I'm going to also provide the on click event handler, so like whenever somebody clicks on them, so we just want to fire this function. And I'm going to also provide the disable flag, so disabled, and that's going to be equals to initially false. And we are going to be also providing the initial color of this exact same color. So I'm going to copy that and place it right here, save my file, and obviously we're going to be getting some kind of error. Okay, so now let me go ahead and go to the top, or you know what, we are already providing an initial value for that, so let's just use that. I'm going to go ahead and just define my button right here, and inside this button we're going to only render the label, so I'll just provide the label right here. And also we are going to be providing a few prompts to that, so like when somebody clicks on this, we want to fire that function. Also on the disable state, we want to make that as a disable, and also we want to provide a bit of styling to that. So I'm going to just provide like background color, and for the background color we want to use that color which is coming from the prompts. And I'm going to also provide the padding, and padding will be set to like 10 pixel on the top, 20 pixel on the bottom, and provide the border, set that to totally none. And the final thing that we have to do is that we have to provide a bit of border radius, which will be set to like 4 pixel. Now let me just save my file, and this is how our component looks like. Let's just close them. And now let's talk about how we are going to be working with decorators on the component variation level. So this is how we are going to be doing that. You know, let me just provide a comment right here so that you guys don't forget that. I'll use like this comment, and I'm gonna say like variation, or variant rather, variant only decorator. There we go. I know the spelling is incorrect, but I don't care. And now if you want to provide the decorator, first of all we have to just use the word decorator. So I'll use like decorators, and here let's just make the as array, because we can specify more than one item for our decorators. And now here we just have to specify our arrow function, but for this arrow function we are going to be providing the story. So I'll just use like story, and for now I'm going to just annotate that as any. So now inside there we can now do anything that we prefer, but that's going to be only applied to this variation. not to all of that variation. And now let me just show you that in action. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just create a div, and by the way, you can like do whatever you want to do right here. So in my case, I'm going to just only render the story. Let's just close there, and I'm going to also provide a bit of styling to there. So I'll just use the styling and provide my padding inside there, and that's going to be set to 20 pixel. We're going to be also providing the background color, and that's going to be set to f0 f0 f0, and I'm going to also provide the border radius, and that's going to be only set to like maybe 8 pixels. So now let me just save my file, and now let me run there. So I'm going to use like npm run dev, not dev, but I'm going to use npm run storybook. There we go. And we're not seeing anything because now we are providing these curly braces, so we have to return something from there. So now if I save my file, and here you can see we're now getting this button and also this border around this button. But now if I click on this default button, as you can see, this decorator will be only applied for this specific variation, not for the entire variations of this button. So there was just a variation level decorator, but now let's suppose if you want to use that same styling or that same decorator for this entire variation of this component, how in the world we are going to be doing that? Well, to do that, that's totally simple and easy. All we have to do is that we have to cut that from here, and we have to just remove that. Now let me just save my file. Then we have to go ahead and go to the top, and here we have to just define. Now let me just provide there right here. I mean, like not the variation, but our decorator. So as you can see now, our decorator is available inside this export default metadata. And now if I check this out, so here you can see that decorator or that styling will be applied to this component variation. And now if I click on the other one, here you can see it's going to be also applied to this one as well. So you know, let me just create a few more variations. So if I just duplicate them and change that to like I don't know, maybe primary or something like that, and then let me just duplicate that once again, and I'm going to change that to like secondary or something like that. Save my file. So here you can see we have our primary. If I click on that same styling will be applied to all of these variation right here. So this is how we are going to be providing our decorator for the variation level, and this is how we are going to be providing there for the local component. Like this styling will be only applied to this button component, not to all of them. But now let me go ahead and create another component. So I'll just create like input field .tsx, and I'll just write my RAFC inside there, and I'm going to also remove that from here. And you know, let me just remove this entire thing. And yeah, I guess that's going to be fine. So now let's just save there. We're going to be also creating another story for that. So I'll use like input field dot stories. Come on, stories.tsx. And now inside there, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the input field. Also, we have to use the export default, and inside there, let's just provide like my inputs or something like that. I'm going to also pass my component, which will be the input field. So let's just pass the input field. There we go. I'm going to save my file, and I'm going to also create a variation of this. So default input. So now inside this one, I'm going to just only pass like the args, and I'm going to pass the label or maybe a placeholder, and it's going to say like enter. This is our file. As you can see, if I click on there, nothing will happen, and it's going to give us an error. That's because we have to go ahead and just import all of their props. So I'll just use like those props, and I'm going to also annotate the as any, and let's just destructure all of their props. Save our file. Now let me just refresh there, and here you can see we are now getting that enter something, and I made a typo, which should be enter something. And now those decorator styling are not applied to this component. Why? That's because now we made this decorator as local to this component only. So if you want to make that as global so that it can be accessible to all of the component inside our project, so this is how we are going to be making that global. So I'm gonna cut that from here. So let's just cut that, save our file, and now I'm gonna go ahead and go to my story folder, which is a dot story. Let's just zoom in a bit. Let me just zoom in a bit, and now we are going to be creating another folder, I mean like file, and I'm going to give it the name of like decorator. Come on, decorators.tsx, and you can give it any name that you prefer. And by the way, you don't even have to create this file. You can definitely go ahead and go to your preview and just provide your decorator there. I am now creating this file because later you're going to be creating a lot of decorators. So for that, this is the best practice to create a decorator. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the React from the React.js. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to import something called the decorator, decorator, from where? From the storybook. So let's just import that from the storybook, not from the add-ons, but from the React.js. So now let's just save there. And now we are going to be creating our decorator. So I'll just use like export with background, come on, with background color, And this is how the convention of the decorator looks like. Anytime you want to create your decorator, first of all, you have to write this with, I mean, like, you don't have to, you can totally give it any name that you prefer, but this is the convention, like, you have to provide this with, and then you can give it any name that you prefer. And now we are going to be taking this annotation, and now let me just place it right here. Now it's going to take something called the story function, so I'll use like story fn, and now inside there we have to just return our stories or our styling, to be precise. So what was our styling? Let me just go back, and I'm going to just cut all of that styling from here. I'm going to cut there and remove this entire decorator from this local component, save my file, and now let me place all of that styling right here. Okay, so let's just go back. I'm going to copy the name of this story fn, place that right here, save my file, and also this should be export. So this is how you are going to be defining your global decorator inside a separate file. And now if you want to use that, you have to go ahead and go to the preview.ts file, and you have to import that right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just import my with background color, and now let me just copy there, and this is how we are going to be providing there or making there as a global to all of the components. So I'll use like export cons and then decorators, and I'm gonna just provide my name, which is with background decorators, and it should be a equal to sign. So now let me just save my file, and now hopefully it should be available to all of our component. So as you can see right here, let's just refresh there, it is available right here, also here, and now let me just check this component out, and yeah, it is also available right here. So this is how we are going to be working with the decorators. So first of all, we saw is that you can provide a decorator inside your component variation. You can also provide there for your entire component variations, which is called the local decorators, by the way. And this is how you're going to be creating a separate file for your decorators, and you can put anything that you prefer if you want to reuse them again and again, either for the component or for the global. And this is how you're going to be importing them, and this is how you're going to be using them inside your preview.ts file. Okay, so now that we've seen a lot about the storybook syntax, but now let's talk about how we are going to be providing a types for our stories. So which means like we are going to be learning about the TypeScript with storybook. So this is how our component will look like. First of all, we are just creating our interface, and now we are expecting the label, the on click, color, and disable. We are also destructuring them, and we are also providing a default values for them. And then finally we are just using the inside our button component, as simple as that. So now let me just close there, and now let me go ahead and go to my stories folder, and I'm going to be defining the button.stories.tsx, and now let me just hit enter. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab our button component, and we also need these styling right here. That's the only reason, I mean, like, not styling but also these types. That's the only reason we are now exporting them so that we can use them in another file. Okay, so now let me just provide my comma there, and I'm going to be also importing the button props. Okay, so let's just save our file, and this is how we are going to be importing the button and also its props. Now anytime you want to use types for our storybook, so storybook provide two types. So the first one we have is the meta, and the second one we have the story object, which will be essentially for our storybook object. So now we have to import them from the storybook, not add-ons, but from the React.js. So now let me just save my file, and the meta will be responsible for all of the metadata which we are going to be providing for the initial values of our stories. And then we have a story object, and that's going to be responsible and also will provide us objects or interfaces for our storybook variations. So now let me just show you that. Here you can see we've been creating our stories like this. First of all, we have provided the export, and then we have provided default, and then we are providing some values, but we're not going to be doing that anymore. So now let's just close there. Instead, we are going to be creating something called the meta object. So I'll use like const meta, and then we also have to annotate there with our prop. So I'll just use like meta, which is now coming from the storybook React.js, and then we also have to tell it that we also want to use our own types, which is called the button prop. So I'm going to copy the and place it right here. So essentially by this code, we simply means that we also want to use the storybook types, but we also want to provide our own ones. Okay, so now let me just provide my equal to sign, and now let's just create our story like this. Now I want you to hold control and click on this meta. So it's going to bring you to this public dash types and then some sort of a random ID, and these are our decoration files. So here you can see we have our type, then which is coming from the meta, and and which is using something, this weird syntax. I don't even know what the hell this is. But yeah, this is how we are going to be getting these types from our storybook. We want to use these types, and we also want to use these button props, which are our own types. So this is how we are going to be providing our title. So I'm going to just write like components, come on, components, and inside there we want to create our button right here. Now underneath there we are going to be also providing our arc types, and inside there I'll provide my color, and that's going to be set to control, come on, control, and we are going to be setting there to color. Now outside from there, let me just duplicate it like a few times. We're going to be also providing the label and also the disable as well. Okay, so I'm going to change that to text, and I'm gonna also change this one to boolean. Now finally we have to export that so that we can use that in other file. Okay, so this is how we are going to be exporting this. So I'll use like export default and then meta, and now let's just save that, and this is how we are going to be creating our story. But now let's create a variation for this story. So now underneath there we are going to be defining our variation. So I'll use like export cons and then default, and now here inside there we are going to be using their story object, which is now coming from this storybook. And by the way, these are also a TypeScript type. So if I hold control and click on there, it's gonna also brings us to this .d or declaration file .typescript. So as you can see, there are a lot of crazy stuff going on right here. Okay, so yeah, we also have to use there, and now we have to set that to as a equal. And now inside there we are going to be using the args, and let's just provide our label. And for the label I'll just say like click me, and I'm going to also provide the color. So the initial color is going to be set to like 007 BFF or something like that. And I'm going to also make that as a disable only false. Save our file. Now let me create a few more. So I'm going to also duplicate that and make that as a disable button. So I'll use like disabled, and I'm going to make the disabled 2, and I'll just say like this should be the disabled button or something like that. Now let me just create the final variation. So I'm gonna duplicate that and change the name of that to like some sort of a red button, and I'm gonna also write like red and change that to like FF 000, or I guess 4 zeros. Yeah, that's gonna be fine. And I'm gonna also make it as a totally false. Save our file, check this out. Now let me just refresh there, click on the button, and now we are getting some sort of error. Story component button default annotation is not defined. So we are now missing something, missing the button. Let me just copy there, and we also have to render there right here. God damn it. So let's just save our file. Now let's check this out. So here you can see we have our button, we also have the disable one, and we also have the red button right here. If I hold Alt and hit A, so now it's going to give us the label, color, disable, and also the on click. So yeah, this is how we can use the types for our storybook. Okay, so now let's talk about the add-ons inside the storybook. So what are add-ons and why should you want to care about that? So now once again I am at the official page of the storybook because I love their landing page. And now let me just go ahead and click on these docs, and whenever we click on there, here you can see we have a section called add-ons, or you can also hit Control K and you can also type the add-ons right here if you wanted to. But in my case I'm gonna only click on these add-ons, and if I click on there are a lot of add-ons right here. Now you might be asking, Hussein, what the hell are add-ons? Add-ons are just basically the extension that you can use to make your storybook amazing, and also a lot of more useful things. So now let me go ahead and go to the VS Code extension area right here. As you can see, we have a lot of extension for the VS Code. So we can type for a specific theme or maybe something. Okay, so if you type this, so it's going to give us basic theme and all of that kind of stuff for the VS Code. And add-ons are exactly the same thing inside the storybook. So there are a lot of them. You can choose different popular ones, and storybook also comes with a default add-ons as well. So we have a chromatic, we have a mock service worker, and which is by this amazing person, Yann, YANN. And I love this guy, to be honest. I swear to God, I love him. I try to message him on Twitter, but he only accepts those accounts who are verified, and I'm broke. So that's why I can't even message him. Bad for me. Anyway, so there are themes, there are designs, storybook, story source, and there are a lot of things right here. So you know what, let me just show you the docs add-on. So I'm gonna just search for that. I'm gonna only write the docs, and hopefully it will give us their docs. And if I click on there, or it was docs or auto docs, let's just write like auto docs. Let me just type there, and Tailwind auto docs. No, this is not something that I am interested in. Now let me just search for the docs as well, and now let me click on this one. And this is how you're going to be installing that specific add-ons. And basically this is just a specific landing page for that add-on. Once again, YANBF. Okay, so now let me just copy there. Now let me show you how we are going to be installing there. But first of all, let me just go ahead and go to my Storybook. And if I click on the main, here you can see Storybook also comes with a default add-on. So we have the onboarding, we also have the essentials, we also have the Storybook, and we also have the add-on interaction. So you can explore there by yourself if you wanted to. But now let me just close there, and now we have to install our own add-ons. So now let me just Control C, and now let me place that command right here, which is npx install Storybook add-ons docs. Or yeah, now let me just use there. Could not determine. I guess we have to use the npm, I guess. So now let me just try there with npm. I'll just use the npm install Storybook, and now it will work totally fine. It's going to install there inside our project. So now let me use npm run Storybook. Come on, Storybook. But before I do that, I want to show you something. Here you can see we only have our button.tsx file. And now let me go ahead and go to my button.stories.tsx. So this is how we are just importing our TypeScript types. This is how we are importing our button. And this is how we are just creating a story for that. And this is how we are just creating our variations for our button. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to also provide their tags right here. So I'll use like tags, and now let me just specify something called the auto docs. So I'll use like auto, come on, auto docs, and now let me just save my file. And now as soon as I do that, let me just open my terminal, and I'm going to just hit enter. So it's going to run my Storybook right now. Now let me just refresh there. And here you can see we are now getting something called the docs, which is new for us. So now let me just click on there. And as soon as I click on there, we are now getting a documentation for our component. So now this is how our component will look like. This is how the coding of my component looks like. This is how we are now providing these prompts like label, disable, on click. We can also see that if I click on this, so it's going to make it disable. We can also change the come on label of that to like something, come on, something, oh my god, something else. And also we can click on there and so much more. So this is how our story will look like, and you can generate all of their docs by first of all installing that auto docs, and also and this is how you have to specify their tags and make them as auto docs. Okay, so that was about the documentation and also about the add-ons inside the Storybook. So what is a style dictionary and why should anyone care about that? So Style Dictionary is a build system and tool that allows designers and developers to define, organize, and manage design tokens in a JSON format. So these tokens can be mapped to different formats such as CSS variables, Sans variables, or even JavaScript objects. So what are the benefits of using a style dictionary? Well, the first benefit is a centralized management. So design tokens are stored in a single source of truth, typically in JSON file, making them easy to maintain and update. It is also a cross-platform. It can output design tokens in different formats like CSS, JSON, SAS, LESS, and even Android iOS specific formats. Extensibility: you can extend and customize how tokens are processed, enabling you to create complex design system with calculated values, custom transformations, and so much more, which we are going to be covering in a short period of time. And finally, automation. So Style Dictionary automates the process of transforming design tokens into usable formats for the development. So how all of that is going to work? So first of all, we would have our input.json file, and inside there we would have our design token. And once we use a style dictionary on there, so it's going to give us the output like so. In this case, we are now using a CSS variables, but if you want to get like a JavaScript version of there or a SAS version of there, you can totally do that, and we're going to be also doing there. So how are you going to be installing there? You just have to write npm I to install there, and then you have to specify style dictionary and also a style dictionary utilities. So what is that style dictionary thing and what is that style dictionary utils thing? So style dictionary is a core library used to manage and transform design tokens. It provides a primary functionality to define, process, and output design tokens in different formats like CSS, SAS, JSON, and so much more, which we just discussed a few seconds ago. And what is that style dictionary util thing? So style dictionary utils is a supplementary utilities package that provides additional helper functions and tools that can be used alongside with the main style dictionary library to make a certain task easier. So that was about the theory, and now let's get into the coding, then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Alright guys, so now let's implement that style dictionary in action. So FYI, this is the official page of a style dictionary, so you just have to type like styledictionary.com, And let me just show you there. This is how you're going to be defining your tokens as a JSON format. It's going to give you the output as a CSS variables. And don't worry, I'm going to also show you like how you can get the Sass output and also the JavaScript output. So you can learn more about that if you wanted to. So you can go to their GitHub, and these are the people who know what they're doing. Okay, so now let me just click on their documentation. If you want to watch like their documentation, architecture, and so on and so forth, but the thing which you are going to be interested in is here. So you can just go to the hooks, then the transformer, and then the transform group, and you just have to like check out this documentation, and that's going to be everything that you have to know. But you don't even have to worry about that because now you're going to be using that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to right click on there and open my terminal. Let me make that a bit bigger so you guys can see everything a bit better, like so. First thing first, I'm going to create a new folder with the name of StyleDict Demos. And now let me go into that StyleDict Demos, and here inside there, let me just open there in the VS Code. So let's just open there, and now let me go ahead and create a new folder with the name of tokens. And inside this folder we are going to be defining our tokens. So now let me just right click on there and create a new file with the name of color, and you have to specify this tokens.json because whenever we are building our design system, we are going to be using this format. So now let me just hit enter. So basically this is just a JSON file, nothing special inside there, but now we are going to be providing our tokens as a JSON values. So now let me open and close my object, and inside there let's just provide our colors key, and inside there we are going to be starting from the violet color, so VIOLET. And now let me just provide some sort of a value to there, and the value will be set to like 7C3AED. So that's going to be my one color. Now let me provide a comma, and I'm going to duplicate there a few times. So there's going to be first one, second, third, and fourth color. Let's just go to the top and change this color value to blue. I'm going to also change the hexadecimal value of the 3D5AFE. Let me change that to green. And I'm going to also change the hexadecimal of the to 10B 981 981. I'm going to also change this value to the red one. Okay, so I'm going to also change that the hex value of that to like EF4444 like 4 times. I'm going to also close that. Now let me just save my file. And this is how our design tokens looks like. And now we are going to be using a style dictionary to transform there to a CSS variables. Then we are going to be transforming there to a Sass, and then finally to a JavaScript. And you can also transform there to like Android code if you wanted to, but in my case I'm not going to. So now let me open my terminal, and now we are going to be installing like both of those packages which we just defined or which we just discussed a few seconds ago. So we are going to be installing a style dictionary and also a style dictionary util. So now let me just hit enter. So it's going to install there right here. This is wait for that. So that's totally done. And now we are going to be telling a style dictionary to transform our tokens to some other format. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just create a new file inside the root, and I'm going to give it the name of like config.json. And inside this config.json, we are going to be providing a few configurations. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to provide the source. We want to get our design tokens. Like we want you to go to the tokens folder, which is this tokens folder right here, and every single thing inside their tokens folder which ends with the .tokens.json. Okay, so here you can see we are now providing our token file is like color.token.json. so we have to just specify there. So that's going to be our source. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to provide our platform. So I'll just write like platform, and here inside there we are going to be only transforming there for a CSS just for now, and I'm going to show you that other ways in a few seconds. So now we want to transform that to a CSS, and now we are going to be using a transform 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 group, and we want to get like a CSS transformation. And we are going to be also providing a path where we want to get the build. Okay, so I'll just write like build path, and here let's just change that to like build and then CSS, and then inside that CSS we want to get all of that results. Now underneath there we are going to be also providing our files. So here inside there, let me just paste my array, and inside this array we are going to be providing our destination and also the formats. Now let me just provide like destination destination, and the destination will be set to variables.css. Okay, now let me just provide a comma, and I'm going to also provide the format, like for which format you want to get your values. Okay, so we want to get that as a CSS variables like so. Now let me just save my file and go back. So this is how we are going to be providing a source, this is how we are going to be specifying different platforms, but for now we are only providing the CSS, but later we are going to be also providing that other stuff. Okay, so we are also providing a transform group. We are also providing a build path, like where you want to get our items to be, like the build item. Then we are providing a file inside there. We are providing a destination and also the format, and that's going to be it. Now let me go ahead and go to my package.json file right here, and here we are going to be providing our own script. So now let's just provide our comma there, and I'm going to provide my scripts right here, and inside the scripts we are going to be providing a build script which will allows us to build our file. So now we are going to be using a style dictionary, not dependency, but DICTIONARY dictionary and build. Now let me just save there, close there, open my sidebar, open my terminal, and now I'm going to be using npm run build. And as soon as I do that, and if I just hit enter, so watch what happens. It's going to give us the build of there, and here you can see this is now checked, like we're not getting any errors, nothing whatsoever. If I click on this build, so now we are getting a CSS folder, and now if I click on this variables.css, bang, we are now getting all of that colors right here. So now we are getting like the violet color, blue color, green color, red color, and so much more. Okay, so this is how we are going to be creating our tokens. This is how we are going to be creating a configuration for that, and this is how we are going to be building there. So now let me just delete this folder from here, and now we are going to be providing a few more tokens, and we are going to be also providing a few more configurations right here. Let me just pass my spacing and also the typography. So we already saw this color one. Now let me go ahead and go to my spacing. So we have this spacing right here. So we have a extra small, we have a small, we have a medium and large. Now let me also go to my typography. So inside there we have a small, base, large. Then we have a font weight like normal, medium and bold, and so on and so forth. So if you want to provide there, you can definitely just provide there. Or if you want to go to my GitHub repository and grab that from there, you totally can. Now let me just rebuild there once again. So if I just rebuild there, here you can see it's going to give us all of that values as a CSS variables. So now we are getting like the colors, we are also getting the spacing, and we are also getting the font sizes and also the font weights right here. Now let me just delete this folder once again, and now we are going to be providing a few more configuration for other platforms. So now let me just hide there. Next up, I'm going to provide the Sass configuration. So I'll just provide like SCSS, and inside there we are going to be providing our transform group, and this transform group will take a SCSS, SCSS, there we go. If I can speak there today. Next we are going to be providing our build path, and here for this build path we are going to be still going once again to that build folder, and now we are going to be creating a new folder with the name of SCSS, and then outside from there we are going to be specifying our files, and inside these files we are going to be providing an object, and here let's just provide our destination, and for the destination we want to go into the variables.scss, come on, SCSS file. Okay, and we are going to be also providing a format for that, and the format we want to get there like SCSS and then variables, there we go. Okay, I forgot to include my colon there. Now let me just save my file, and these are all the configuration that you have to specify for the SCSS. So now let me just close there. I'm gonna zoom in a bit once again, and now let me just rebuild there once again. Now it's going to give us the CSS and also the SCSS. So let's just go into the build folder. So now we have a CSS, and we also have this SCSS. If I click on there once again, so now we are getting all of our CSS or Sans variables right here. So we are getting there for the colors, for the spacing, and also for the font sizes and font weights. Now let me just close there. And finally, let me just show you there for the JavaScript. I'm going to also hide there. And now let me just show you there for the JavaScript. I'm going to provide my JS, and inside there we are going to be providing my transform group, and here we are going to be setting that to the JavaScript. And now let's just provide our build, and here let's just provide our build and then JavaScript. You want to go into that folder, provide a comma there. We are going to be also specifying our files inside there. We have to provide the object destination, and the destination will be set to that variables, not CSS, but in this case JavaScript. We're going to be also providing a format, and the format will be set to JavaScript and then ES6. Let's just go back, save my file, and finally let's just build there. And I'm going to just remove this folder once again and rebuild there by using npm run dev. So I'll use like npm run dev, or not dev but build once again. And now let me just hit enter. So it's gonna give us the output of CSS, SAS, and also the JavaScript. Let me click on the build, and we are also getting this JavaScript. So now let me just click on there. We have a variables.js file right here. Now we have all of our JavaScript variables. So we're now getting there for the colors, for the spacing, for the font size, and for the font width. And that was it about the style dictionary. And next we are going to be covering the CLS6. Now let me show you another super important package for building a design system and a component library, which is called the CLS6. So what is a CLS6 and why should anyone care about that? So CLS6 is a small utility for conditionally joining class names. It helps you dynamically add or remove CSS classes based on a condition without having to worry about manual string concatenation or complex logic. So that was it about the basic definition of CLS6, and now let me show you that in action. Alright guys, so now let me show you that CLS6 package in action. So I'm gonna open my terminal and let me just zoom in a bit so you guys can see everything a bit better, like so. There we go. Now I'm going to use mkdir to make a new directory with the name of CLS6 demos. And now let me go into that CLS6 demos. And now I'm going to open that in my VS Code. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to open my terminal. And I'm going to be using npm npm init-y to initialize our package.json right here. Now let me go into that package.json file. And here inside there, we are going to be only providing one script, which will be set to type and then module. Okay, let's just provide there. And by the way, we are going to be also creating a script for ourselves. So I'll just write a dev. And here I'm going to only provide like node and then src and then index.js, because we are going to be only testing this index.js file, which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. So you only have to specify this type module and then this dev package right here. So now let me just close there. And here we are going to be creating a src folder, and inside there let's just create our index.ts, or not ts but js. Now we have to install the CLS6. So I'm going to use like npm I and then CLS6. So it's going to install there inside our existing project. So that's already done. Let's just go into our project, and here you can see we have our CLS6 dependency right here. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the CLS6 from where? From the CLS6. And let me just give you the basic usage of a CLS6. So you can basically pass a class names or conditional expressions like true and false, and it returns a string of valid class names. So what do I mean by that? You know, let's just remove that from here, and I'm going to just write like CLS6 right here, and I'm going to pass a button right here, and I'm going to also pass like button primary, and now it should be just a primary. There we go. And now let me store that inside the variable with the name of button class, and it's going to be equals to the CLS6. And now let me just log that to the console like button class is right here, or yeah, I guess button class would be fine. Let me just save that, and I'm going to use like npm run dev. And once I do that, so what am I getting? I am now getting button and button primary. So basically it's going to concatenate this string with this one right here, but we are not done. There are a few things that you also have to keep in mind. We can also pass a conditional expression. So now let me just remove there, and I'm going to create a variable with the name of is primary, and it's going to be set to true. And now underneath there, we are going to be using our CLS6 right here. And now let me just provide my button right here, and now we are going to be checking like is primary and primary. So if this is true, it's going to give us this value, but if that's not true, so it's going to only give us this button right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just write like primary button class or something like that. And now let me just log that to the console like primary button class. I'm going to save this file right now. And now let me just rerun there. So it's going to give us like button and also button primary. But now let me just change that to like false. And now let me just save my file once again and run there. So now it's going to only give us that button and not this button primary right here. So that's the second thing. We can also pass arrays of values. So if the item is true, so it's going to include there as a final class string. But if that's not the case, so it's not going to include there as a final string. So what do I mean by all of that gibberish? So we just have to write like is primary, and it's going to be set to true. And now let me just close there. Now we are going to be using our CLS6. Here we have to just specify our button. And now let me just provide like button primary. I'm going to also specify is primary, and this is right, and then active, but we have to provide that as an array. Okay, so now let me just convert that to array, and now let me store that inside the classes variable right here. I'm gonna also log these classes, and now let me just save my file. I'm gonna use that npm run, and now it's gonna give us like button primary, and then this active class right here. And why is that? That's because primary is set to true, so that's why we are now getting this active. But now if we change that to like false, come on, false, and now let me just save my file and rerun that. So now it's gonna only gives us that button and button primary and not the active one. We can also use that with objects. So now let me just remove that, and I'm gonna define two variables with the name of like is primary, and it's gonna be set to true. And I'm going to also define another variable with the name of is disable, and that's going to be set to false. Now underneath that, we are going to be using our CLSX, and here we have to specify our object right here. So I'm going to pass like button, and the value will be set to true. I'm going to also provide like button primary, and that's going to be set to this is primary. So if this value is true, it's going to include this class. But if this value is false, so it's not going to include this value right here. I'm going to provide a comma there, primary comma. I'm going to provide yet another one like is disabled. And here let's just set that to is disabled right here. So once again, if this value is true, it's going to include this button disable. But if this value is false, so it's not going to include this value right here. And now let me just store that inside the classes variable. And now let's just log that classes to the console. There we go. Now let me just save my file, and I'm going to open my terminal and use npm run dev. Now we are getting like button and also button primary, as you can see right here, because this value is true. So that's why we are now getting this value. Now we are not getting this what do we call this button disable. And why is that? That's because this value is set to false. So that's why we are not getting that value. But now if I convert that to like true, and now let me just save my file and rerun that. Now here you can see we are now getting button primary and button disable. But now if we convert like both of them to like false, convert this one to false as well. Let's just save our file, and now let me just rerun there. Here you can see we are only getting the button and nothing else than there. So that was our small package which is called the CLSX. So now let me show you yet another useful utility package which we are going to be using for building our component library, and which is called the CVA. So what is a CVA and why should anyone care about that? So CVA, or Class Variance Authority, is a utility that helps manage and apply conditional CSS class names in a structured and reusable way. Often used with utility first CSS frameworks like Tailwind CSS, it allows you to define class variations based on a component props or states to maintain the consistent styling. So that was just a quick theory about the CVA, and now let me show you that in action. So now let me show you that Class Variance Authority in action. So I'm going to open my terminal, and I'm going to make that a bit bigger so you guys can see everything a bit clear like so. So I'm going to use npm create and then read at latest, and now I'll just give it the name of like CVA demos. And now I'm going to choose React.js with TypeScript. Let's just go into that CVA demos folder and install every single thing inside there. While it's installing, I'm going to go ahead and go to my Tailwind CSS, and then I'm going to click on this getting started, go to the framework and guides, click on the Vite, and let's just wait for that to finish. Then we are going to be making a Tailwind CSS setup. That's totally done. I'm going to open that in my VS Code, and this is how it looks like. So I'll just remove this public folder. Let's just go to the src, remove this assets, app.css, remove every single thing from the app.tsx, and I'm going to use my RAFC inside there. And now I'm going to copy this command, open my integrated terminal, place it right here. So it's going to take a bit of time to install the Tailwind CSS, the post CSS, and auto prefixer right here. Okay, that's totally done. I'm going to also hit enter to initialize my Tailwind CSS. That's also done. Now let me copy every single thing from there to my Tailwind config file and place it and replace it with this new content right here. Let's just remove that. I'm going to also copy this index.css and place there right here. Now let's just remove that. And now I'm going to open my terminal once again, and I'm going to use npm run dev to run my server, and this is how it looks like right here. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create a components folder, and inside there I'm going to create my button .tsx. So this is how we are going to be creating our folder, and inside there we are now creating our button.tsx file, and I'll just use my RAFC just for now. I'm going to save this file right now, and the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import something called the CVA. Let's just import the CVA from where? From the Class Variance Authority, but we did not install it. So we have to first of all install there, then we would be able to use this. So I'm going to use like npm I to install the class variance authority, if the spelling is correct. So it's going to install there right here. That's totally done. Now let me import the CVA from where? From the class variance authority. That's totally done. Now let me just save my file, and here we have to define class variations. Okay, so variation, or we don't even have to write there. So this is how we are going to be defining a different variation for our button component. So I'll use my CVA and I'm going to execute there. So it's going to first of all take the base class names, and it's going to also take the configuration, which we are going to be providing in a few seconds. So first of all, I'm going to specify some sort of a base classes, like pairing for the x-axis will be set to 4, pairing for the y-axis will be set to 2, and rounded, totally, medium, and also focus, FOCUS, focus will be set to outline and then none. Okay, so now outside from there, here we are going to be providing our configuration right here. So now let me just hit enter. I'm going to go back, and this is how it looks like. And inside this object, we are going to be providing our variants. So variants, and inside these variants, we are going to be providing different variation for our component. So I'll just provide like color, for instance, and inside this color we would have two flavor of our color. So we would have a primary, and I'm going to specify like background totally blue of 500. I'm going to also change the text to totally white, and here we are going to be also providing a secondary. It's going to be set to like background totally gray of 500, and also the text will be totally black. Okay, so that's going to be the first variation for our color inside our component. Okay, so now underneath there we are going to be using the size, and for this size we are going to be providing a like small and large size. So I'll just write like text only small, and I'm going to also provide like pairing on the y-axis of 1, pairing for the x-axis of 3. Now underneath there we are going to be also providing a large, and the large will be set to text only large, and pairing for the y-axis will be set to 3, pairing for the x-axis will be set to 6. I'm going to save this file right now, and now underneath this size I'm going to also provide different state for my button, like the active state, the disabled state. So I'll just write like state, and here we are going to be providing like active. If my button is active, so we are going to be using background totally blue of 700. But if that's not the case, and if the button is set to, I can type there today, if the button is set to disable, so we are going to be providing background totally gray of 300, and also cursor will be not allowed in that situation. So now let me just save my file, go back, and here we are going to be also providing a default values. So there should be underneath this one. Okay, so I'll just write like default values, and here inside there we are going to be providing a default value for the color like primary, and I'm going to also specify the size, and the size default value will be set to small. I'm going to save this file right now. I'm going to also store this entire thing inside the variable with the name of what do we call it, buttons, or yeah, button styles would be fine. Okay, so let's just save there. I'm going to copy a name of there, but it should be button styles. Okay, now let me copy the name of them. Now we are going to be going into our button component, and here we are going to be using this. So now let me just remove that from here. I'm going to also change that to the button. So this button will take a few props. So now let me just destructure there first of all. So we are going to be providing a color. It's going to also take the size, and it's going to also take the state, and we are going to be also providing our content, which will be set to a children. So I'm going to also create a button props interface for that. I'm going to copy a name of that and define my interface right here. So I'll use like interface button props. Inside there we're going to be optionally providing a color for our button. So if the user want to provide this color, they totally can, but if they don't want to provide, they don't even have to. So I'll just provide like primary, either use primary or use a secondary, because we already set this up. Now we are going to be also providing a size, and that's going to be also totally optional. So either a small size or large size. Now we are going to be also providing a state, and the state will be set to active or disable. And finally we are going to be providing a children, but why am I providing a comma? These are not objects, so I'll just write like children, and we are going to be getting a React node from the React node. Now let me just hit enter. So it's going to import that React node right here. That's totally done. Now we have to use these props inside our button component. So I'll just first of all render my children right here. So I'll just write like children. For the class names, now we are going to be using our button styles, which we already defined right here. Okay, so now let me just hide there. I'm going to also hide this one, Now we are going to be using this button classes right here for the class names. And now here we are going to be passing that color, which we are now taking as a parameter right here. We are going to be also specifying the size and also the state, which we are now taking as a parameters. So that's totally done. Now let me just save my file, but we are going to be also providing a disable state. If the state is equal to disable, so in that situation, which means like our button will be disabled. So that's totally done. Now let me go ahead and go to my app, and here we have to use that right here. So let's just remove that. And first of all, let me just put a bit of classes to there. So I'll use like spaces on the y-axis of 4, and here inside there we're going to be using that button component which we just defined. Okay, so now let me just close there right here, and I'm going to specify like primary large button or something like that. And here we are going to be passing a color. So the color will be, now let me just hold control and hit space. So here you can see we only have two options, like primary or secondary. So in this situation, I'm going to only choose like primary. I'm going to also provide the size of the, and the size will be set to large. Okay, so that's totally done. We can also specify that other one, which was the state. So I'll just write like state, and state will be set to active. Okay, so as soon as I do that, now the error will be gone. Now let me run that by using npm run dev, and check this out. So here you can see we are now getting our button. We can also change that to like disable or disabled. And now let me just save my file. So now my button is disabled right here. So you know what, we're not going to be providing a state for this one. Let me even make that as a optional. So now let me just make that optional so that we don't get that TypeScript error. We're going to be also using that button once again, and here we are going to be providing like secondary small button, and here let's just pass our color inside there, and the color in this case I'm going to pass like secondary color. I'm going to also provide the size of totally small to there. Okay, so now let me just save my file. So here you can see we're now getting a secondary button and also smaller button than this one. Okay, so there's the second button, and now let me just create the final one, which will be for the disable. So I'll just use like button and disable button like so, and I'm going to pass like the color, and the color will be set to primary. I'm going to also provide the state, come on, and the state will be set to disabled. I'm going to also provide the size, and the size will be set to small. I'm going to save this file right now. So here you can see this is how we are going to be defining a different variation for our components by using this CVI package right here. So these are going to be basically our base classes, and then we can specify different variations like for the color we can use like primary, secondary. For the size we can use like small and large. For the state we can use like active and disable. And if we did not specify any color or size, so it's gonna also take these default variations right here. So yeah, that was it about the CVI in action. Alright guys, so now we are going to be building our own custom component library from scratch by using tools like React.js, TypeScript, Tailwind CSS, Rollup.js, Storybook, React Testing Library, VTest, CLS6, CVI, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open my terminal, and now I'm going to zoom in a bit so you guys can see everything a bit better like so. And I'm going to create a new folder with the name of my components library or something like that. Now let me go into that my components library, and now I'm going to open that in my VS Code, and this is how it looks like. So first of all, I'm going to initialize my GitHub repository by using git init. So let's just use that, hit enter. So it's going to initialize my GitHub repository, and now I'm going to be using npm init-y to initialize my package.json file. Okay, so now let me go into that package.json file, and now here you can see we don't have anything special inside there, but we only have this boilerplate of package.json file. So now let me just close there, and now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to install React.js and also TypeScript. So I'm going to use like npm I and then React.js, TypeScript, and also types for the React.js as well. So now let me just hit enter. So it's going to install the inside these packages, and that's totally done. And now I'm going to also create a new file with the name of gitignore. So I'll just use like gitignore, and inside there we are going to be only ignoring the node modules folder. And now let me just save there, and here you can see that's going to be gone. It should be gone. And now there we go. So that's totally done. Now we are going to be creating a folder structure, and then we are going to be writing our code inside there. So now let me just create a new folder with the name of src. Inside this src folder, we are going to be creating a new file with the name of index.ts. So let's just write like index.ts. Also, we are going to be creating a new folder with the name of components. So I'll just use like components, and inside there we're going to be creating a new file with the name of index.ts once again. And now inside this components folder, we are going to be creating yet another folder with the name of buttons. So let's just use like buttons, or just a button would be fine. And now I'm going to create a new file inside this button folder with the name of index.ts. Now let me just close all of that files, and now I'm going to go into that buttons folder, and now we are going to be creating yet another file with the name of button.tsx. And now inside there we are going to be just writing a boilerplate for our button component. Now let me just save there, and we would also need to import the React.js. So let's just use, come on, import the React.js from the React.js, and we would also need to grab the React node. So now let me just save my file. It's gonna also take a few props. So now let me just write like children, and we're going to be annotating there as button props or something like that. So now let me create that interface with the name of button props, and now inside there we are going to be creating our children. And now let me just paste like React node, which we are now importing from the React.js, or React node once again. Now let me just save my file, and that's gonna be it. Also, we would need to change this div to the button so that we should get our button right here. So now let me just save my file. I'm gonna close this file right now. Now I'm gonna go into this buttons folder, and inside there we have this index.ts file. So I'm gonna click on there, and here we are going to be exporting. Let's just write like export default from where? From our buttons folder, or from our buttons file. So now let me just save my file, close there. Now we are going to be clicking on this index.ts file, which is now available inside this components folder, not inside the buttons folder. So I'm going to just activate there, and here we are going to be exporting default as button from where? From our buttons component. So I'll just use like let's just go to that buttons folder, and now let me just save there, and that's totally done. Now finally we have to go into this root index.ts file, which is now available inside this src folder, and we only have to export every single thing from there. So let's just use like export every single thing from that components folder like so. Now let me just save my file, and that's totally done. So now we are going to be adding TypeScript to our component library. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to write like npx and then tsc and then dash dash init to initialize my TypeScript inside this project. So now let me just close there, and here you can see now it's going to give us this tsconfig.json file. I'm going to just double click on there, and I'm going to remove every single thing from there. And now we are going to be replacing them with our own one. So first of all, we are going to be providing our compiler options, and now inside this compiler option we are going to be first of all providing the target. Okay, so our target will be ES next. In this case, I'm going to also provide a comma, and we are going to be also providing like ES module into repo. And now let me set that to true. Also, we are going to be providing the force consistent casing in file names, and let's just set that to true. And we are going to be also providing a strict mode, and that's going to be also set to true. And let's just also provide the skip library checks. That's going to be also true. And for the root directory, and the path will be only dot. So now underneath there, let me just even provide a comma there. We are going to be also providing a JSX. So for the JSX, we want to use React.js in this case. And also for the module, we are going to be setting that to ES next. I'm going to also provide the declaration. So let's just use like declaration. That's going to be set to true. We are going to be also providing a declaration directory, and which will be our types directory, in which we are going to be writing our types. Okay, so now let me provide a comma there. We are going to be also setting the source map to true. The out directory will be set to a disk because we are going to be building our project. And now we are going to be using like module resolution, and module resolution will be set to node. Okay, we are going to be also providing allow synthetic default imports. This is set to true. And finally, emit declaration only. Come on. Emit declaration only, and also set that to true. And now let me just save my file, and that's everything that you have to provide for your tsconfig file. And now we are totally done with the TypeScript stuff. So now we are going to be installing Rollup, and that's going to be a lot of fun, but you have to install a lot of dependencies for that. So if you want to type that by yourself, you totally can, but you can also find all of them in my GitHub repository. So I'm going to just use like npm I, let's just zoom in a bit, and then dash d to install the as a dev dependency. Let's just install the Rollup and go to the plugin, and then common.js. We also have to install the Rollup. Let's just go to the plugin once again, install the node resolve, then Rollup once again, go to the plugin, and then Tensor, then Rollup, plugin, TypeScript, because we are going to be using TypeScript. And now we are not going to be providing this add symbol, but we are going to be only providing just a roll up. Okay, and then roll up plugin DTS and roll up plugin key dependencies external ts lib roll up plugin then post css, because we are going to be also installing a Tailwind css, so we have to install all of them right here. It's going to take a while to install all of these dependencies, but I'm gonna just fast forward this video right now. That's totally done. I'm gonna close there, and now I'm gonna go ahead and just go to the root, and here we're going to be creating our rollup.js file. So for the configurations, I'll use like rollup and then config then .js. So let's just add there, close that one, and here inside there we're going to be placing a lot of code, but you don't have to worry about this code because these are just a code for building this project. Here you can see we're now just grabbing all of their dependencies which we just installed, like resolve, common.js, TypeScript, DTS, and so on and so forth. And then we are providing an input like where is our file located. Then we want to get like the output in this file and format and so on and so forth. Okay, so we are also providing a few plugins which we are going to be using inside this project. So that's everything that you have to provide. And if you want to also get that from my GitHub repository, you totally can. But you don't even have to worry about this code. If you care about that, well, you can just check out some video about the rollup. But in my case, I'm not going to be worrying about that. So now let's just close there. And that was the setup of a rollup. But now I'm going to go into my package.json, and here we're going to be replacing a few things. So I'm going to have to delete the main and also the test and also the keywords. Let's just delete them because we are going to be providing our own stuff. Okay, so I'll just first of all provide my main, and main will be coming from this dist folder, because once we build our project, so it's going to go into this dist folder and then CJS and then index.js. Okay, so that's going to be my main file entries. Now we are going to be also providing our files, and for these files we are going to be going into the dist. That's totally done. We're going to be also providing our types. Okay, so once I provide that for the TypeScript types declaration, you want to go to the dist and then index.d.ts. Like so. And now underneath there we are going to be also providing our own script to build our project. So I'll just go ahead and provide the rollup, and that's going to be set to rollup and then -c and then --bundle as CJS. There we go. I'm going to save this file right now. And now underneath there we are going to be also providing a keywords. If you don't want to provide these keywords, you don't even have to provide there. But if you provide them, like once you push this project to the npm, so you're going to see these keywords inside your landing page. So I'll just write like random, and then I'm going to provide like test and then test2 or something like that. And now underneath these keywords, we are going to be also providing a type, and type will be set to module. Okay, so let's just use like module like so. And now underneath there, we are going to be also providing a peer dependencies. Okay, so underneath this dependencies, we are going to be providing a peer dependencies like dependencies. And now let me just set the React, come on, not async, but set the React to React.js, not 19 but 18. So basically peer dependencies just simply means like whenever somebody else using these packages, they have to have at least React.js 18 or greater version than that. And now let me just save my file, and that was about the rollup.js. And now let me close there. Okay, so now we are going to be installing a Tailwind CSS in our project. So I'll just go to the Tailwind. Come on, if I can get there today, tailwindcss.com. I'm gonna go to the getting started button. Now let me click on the framework and guides, choose read. I'm gonna copy all of these commands, and now let me open my terminal and place that right here. So it's going to install the Tailwind CSS, post CSS, and auto prefixer. Now that's totally done. I'm going to hit enter one more time to initialize my Tailwind CSS inside this project right here. So now we are getting this Tailwind config.js file. I'm going to go there and copy every single thing from there and place that right here. That's also done. I'm going to also create this index.css file. So I'm going to copy there, go to my src folder and create a new file with the name of index.css. And now let me just copy every single thing from there, place it right here, save my file, and there's gonna be it. And now if I just use like npm run rollup.js, so it's gonna build my project. So I'm gonna use like npm run and then rollup. Now let me just hit enter, and here you can see it's gonna build my project right here. So we can now find all of that code inside this dist folder. Now inside there we have our index.d.ts. We also have our CJS, and inside there we have all of our components which are now ready to publish to the npm packages. Okay, so if you want to publish there by yourself, so you can just use like npm publish, I guess, and you have to also log into the npm, and it's going to publish there to your npm. So this is how we are going to be building there. And now let me just delete this folder, and we're not going to be pushing there to the npm. So that's totally done. Now we are going to be adding a storybook for visually testing our components. So how in the world we are going to be doing that? We just have to write like npx and then storybook at latest, come on, at latest, and then init. Now if I just hit enter, so it's going to initialize the storybook inside this project. So now it's going to ask us to choose either Vite or some sort of a bundler. So I'm going to have to choose Vite, and now it's going to install there inside my machine. And this is how my storybook will look like, but it will give us an error. You will just see that in a few seconds. God damn it, just show us the error. Oh, if I click on that, but anyways, it's going to give us an error because we need to install the Vite. We also have to install the React DOM. So I'm going to just hit N and set that to no. Let me just rerun that once again. I'm going to use like npm, not npm, but I'm going to use like npm storybook or npm run storybook. And once I do that, now it's going to give us that error. Okay, so here you can see it's going to crash because we have to install the Vite. So now we have to install the Vite and React DOM. So I'm going to use like npm I, then React and React DOM, and also the Vite. So now it will successfully start to work. That's totally done. I'm going to use npm run storybook once again, and now it's going to start working. So here you can see we are now getting our configuration. If I go to the button, so we are now getting these buttons, primary, secondary. We are also getting our header components, and we are also getting our pages, and everything is working the way we expect them to work. So that's totally done. And now I'm going to have to just stop there for a few seconds because we are going to be removing every single thing from the stories, and we are going to be defining our custom story in a few seconds. Okay, so now we are going to be building a simple component, and we are going to be also testing there inside our storybook. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go into my buttons component, or just a simple button component, and here I'm going to just remove every single thing from there, and I'm going to just replace it with this RAFC once again. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the React from the React.js. We would also need to import the CVA. Oh, we did not install the CVA, like class variance authorities, so we are going to have to install the. I'm going to use like npm I and then class variance authority, authority, I guess that's the spelling. So it's going to install there right here, and we would also need to install something called the TW merge or tailwind merge. I hope the spelling is correct. Yep, that's totally done. So now we have to import the CVA from class variance authority, and we also have to import the TW merge, like the tailwind merge, from their tailwind merge package. So now let me just save my file. Now underneath there we are going to be defining our CVA. So for the base classes, I'll just write like pairing for the x-axis will be set to 4, pairing for the y-axis will be set to 2, totally rounded, and focus will be set to outline, and then none. That's totally done. I'm going to also provide my object, and inside there we are going to be providing a different variations. So I'll just write like variants, and here inside there let's just provide our variant like variant, a few flavors for our buttons. So I'll just provide like primary, and primary will be set to background totally blue of 500, and text will be set to totally white. Underneath there we are going to be also providing a secondary, and the background will be set to totally gray of 500, like so. Text will be set to totally black. And now let me just save my file, and now underneath this variant we are going to be also providing a size. So for this size, like our button can accept the small size, and the text will be set to totally small, and our button can also accept I thought I'm just writing a JSON. So our button can also accept the medium, and it should be set to text of totally base, and we can also specify the large size for our button, which will be set to text totally large. And that's going to be it. And we are going to be also providing a disable state, so disabled, and for the disable state we are going to be setting there to true. So if it is disabled, in that situation we are going to be providing the background of totally gray of 300 and text of totally gray 600, like so. Cursor will be not allowed, like so. And now underneath there, for the default styling, we are going to be providing like default variants. And for the variant we are going to be setting that to like primary for the default one, and for the size that's going to be set to medium, and also for the disable which will be set to false initially. So now let me just save my file, and this is how our class variance authority looks like, but I'm going to have to store that inside the button styles like so. And now let me just save my file, and I'm gonna also hide there. Now our button will accept a few prompts. So it's gonna accept the variant. I'm gonna destructure there right here. So it's gonna accept the variant. It's gonna also accept the size and disabled children and class names like so, or just a singular class name. And next we're going to be also destructuring the entire props or resting the entire props. And we also have to define an interface for that so that we can annotate our component. So I'll just use the interface with the name of button props, which will extends from the react.buttons button HTML attributes. And here we're going to be also providing an HTML button and here we're going to be also providing an HTML button element. I'm going to also close there, and here inside there let's just provide our variants. So variants, and or just a singular variant. That's going to be totally optional, and we can either get the primary variant or we can get the secondary 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 variant. So for the size, which will be also totally optional, we can set it to totally small size or medium size or large size. Okay, and why am I providing a commas there? God damn it, I always do that. And let's just provide a disable, and disable will be set to a boolean. Now let me just save my file. I'm gonna copy this button props from there, and I'm gonna annotate my component with there like so. And now let me just save my file. Let's just go back so you guys can see everything a bit better. And this is how my component looks like. So now I'm going to be using a Tailwind merge to merge our classes. So I'll just use like TW merge, and let me just import there because yeah, I guess we already imported. Yeah, we already did. Okay, so now inside there, we are going to be passing our button style component, or not a component but a function, which we are now creating by using this CVA package, like class variance authority package. So we are going to be calling there right here, and inside this button style we are going to be providing our variant, which we are now taking as a parameter. So I'm gonna have to copy there from there, place there right here. We are going to be also providing a size to there like so, and finally we also have to provide the disable prop. So I'm gonna copy there and place it right here. I'm gonna store the result of there inside my variable with the name of merged class names, and that's going to be set to this tailwind config. And by the way, outside from this object and also these parentheses, we are going to be providing our class names, and now that's totally done. Okay, so now let me just save my file. Here inside this button, I'm gonna just first of all change there to the button because we are going to be using there. And for this button label, let me just change that to button right here like so. And for this button label, it's going to accept the children. So now for the props, we are going to be destructuring all of them. And now let me just provide like props. And for the class names, we are going to be providing our merged class names. And for the disable state, we are going to be providing their disable state. And now let me just save my file. And this is how we are going to be defining our button component by using class variance authority, Tailwind CSS, Tailwind merge, React.js, and TypeScript. So now let me just close there. And now we are going to be testing our component by using the storybook. So now let me just zoom in a bit. And now inside this src folder, I'm going to create a new folder with the name of stories. And let's just define our button story right here. So I'm going to just create a new file with the name of button.stories.tsx. And now inside there, let's just define our first story. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to import the type of meta and also the story object, okay, which we are going to be using right now. From where? From the storybook, not add-ons, but from the React.js. Okay, so now let me just save my file, and it should be uppercase M, not a lowercase. And now we are going to be also importing our button so that we can test there. That's totally done. And now we have to define our meta. So I'll just use like meta, and I'm going to also annotate there like so. So meta and the type of button, because we are now creating our button, and that's going to be equals to this object. So we have to provide the title, so which will be our components, and then button. And now we also have to provide the component. So the component is that component which we already grabbed. Let me just even copy the name of that, god damn it. There we go. And now let me provide a comma there. For the parameters, we are going to be setting there to totally layout. Let's just provide our layout, and it's totally centered like so. And I'm going to also provide the tags. So for these tags, we are going to be also using the auto docs. And now let me just save my file, and I'm going to hover over there. I'm going to hover over there, quick fix there, and add there to the workspace settings so that it will not give us that error again and again. Now underneath there, we are going to be exporting our default meta That's totally done about the meta, but now we have to define our type, and that's going to be set to a story. And now let's just set that to like story object, and here we are going to be providing a type of meta and close there. Now let me just save my file, and now we are going to be providing our actual stories for our button. So I'll just use like export const primary, and primary button will look something like this. So I'm going to annotate there with this story first of all, and it's going to be set to this object. We have to provide the args, and inside these args we have to provide the variant, and the variant will be set to primary, which is also a default value. If you want to provide there, you totally can, but if you don't want to provide there, you don't have to. So for the size, I'm going to set that to medium, and for the children, I'll just provide like primary button or something like that. Now let me save my file, and I'm going to be using npm run storybook so that we can test this out. Storybook, and this is how my button looks like. But I'm wondering why the classes are not provided. If I click on there, why is the classes not working? You know, let me just go to index.css. Oh, that's because we have to go in there to the story, and then we have to go to the preview, and now we are going to be importing our, let's just go to the src folder, and inside there we have our index.cs css. And now let me just save my file, refresh this out, and here you can see our styling is now working the way we expect him to work. If I click on the secondary, so it's going to give us this styling. I can also get like the smaller button, the medium button, or the larger button. I can totally change the content of the button. I can do whatever I want to do with this. So if I want to make that like disable, if I click on this set boolean and change that to true, and here you can see the cursor is not allowed. That's going to be my primary button, as you can see there right here. So now let me just refresh there. That's going to be my primary button. Let's just set that to false, and I guess that's going to be fine. Now let me go ahead and go to my storybook once again, and I'm going to just create a few more stories. Now underneath there, I'll just use like export const secondary, and I'm going to also annotate there with my story. It's going to be equals to this object. We have to provide our arguments inside there. The variant will be set to secondary, and we also have to provide the size, and the size will be set to totally medium. And also for the children, I'll say like secondary button component or something like that. Now let me just save my file, click on the secondary, and now we are getting the secondary. So this is going to be basically our primary button, and this is going to be our secondary button right here, which is also looking cool. Now we are going to be taking care of the small button, so I'll just use like small and provide my story right here, and I'll just provide like arguments, and for these arguments, let's just provide our variants and primary, and the size will be set to totally small, and the children will say like small button or something like that. I'm gonna save this file right now, click on the small, and now we are getting our small button, which is a bit smaller than this secondary button right here. Now let me create two more stories for the large and also for the disabled one. So I'll use like large and annotate that as a story, and here we're going to be passing our arguments, and variants will be set to totally primary, like so. Let's just save our file. For the size, we're going to be providing a large size today, and for the children, that's going to be set to large button, like so. Save our file, click on the large, and now we are getting our large button. And finally, we have to create another story for the disable button. So I'll just use like disable and annotate there with the story, and inside they provide our arguments. And here we're going to be passing our variant, and variant will be set to primary, like so, and the size will be set to totally medium. And I'm gonna also provide a disable and set that to true, and the children will be set to disable button, like so. Now let me just save my file, and now if I click on the disable, and as you can see, this is a disable button, so the cursor is not allowed. So this is how we are going to be creating our actual component. This is how we are going to be visually testing our component. But now if you want to like actually write a test cases for this component, so we have to make a setup for that. So we are going to be installing like vtest and also the React testing library to test that. Okay, so now we are going to be installing the React testing library and so on and so forth. So now let's just close there. And I'm gonna also stop there for a few seconds because now we are about to install a lot of things. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to install the, what do we call it, the vtest as a dev dependency. So it's gonna take a while to install that, but we are going to wait for it, baby. Okay, it's taking a lot of so now that's totally done. Now we are going to be installing another package as a dev dependency, which is a testing library, and then React.js, and also come on, testing library, and then user event. Okay, so let's just provide them. That's totally done. We also have to install as a dev dependency the JS DOM, and we also have to install what we call it npm I, then dash d at testing library, and then just DOM. Come on, just DOM install there. Now we are going to be installing a types for this. So I'll use like npm I and then dash d and add types for what, for the jest, and also for testing library, and then just come on, just DOM. Oh, we already installed the just DOM, so it's gonna override there basically. And now, okay, it's taking a bit of time, but now we have to install something called the testing library, library, and then just a DOM. Now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to go to the root, and inside this root we have to create a new file with the name of vtest.config.ts. Okay, so once we do that, here inside there we have to provide a bit of configuration for our vtest. So I'll just first of all import something called the define config from the rollup, not from the vtest. Come on, from the vtest and then config. And now underneath there we are going to be also importing React.js from where, from the vtest, and we have to install this package. So we are going to be installing the from the vt.js and then plugin React. I'm gonna copy the name of the like so. I'm gonna open my terminal and use npm I and then vt.js plugin React.js. So while it's installing, now we have to export default that define config, and here inside they we are going to be providing our plugins, so we want to just use the React.js. Okay, so I'm going to just execute there, save my file, provide a comma there, and now we are going to be providing our test cases. So we want to use the environment, environment. So we want to use the environment which will be our JS DOM, and we also want to provide the globals, and which will be set to true. Come on, true, there we go. And we are going to be also providing a set of files, and which will be set to src test and setup.ts. I'm gonna save this file right now. Now we have to go into this src folder, and inside there we are going to be creating a new folder with the name of tests, and inside there we are going to be creating a new file with the name of setup. Okay, so I'll use like setup.ts, and here we have to import a few things. So I'll just import first of all the testing library, and we are going to be getting there from the just DOM, and also we have to import something called the testing library from the React.js. So now let me just save this file right now. That's totally done. I'm gonna also go into my package.json file right now, and we have to create our script for our test. So what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna just write like test and then UI, and now we have to just write like vtest and then dash dash UI, not 3 dashes but only 2 dashes. So now let me just save my file, close there, and now I'm gonna also go into my tsconfig file, like tsconfig.json file, and here we have to specify our types. So let's just write like types, and types will be set to retest and then globals, like so globals, there we go. And here we also have to provide our comma, save our file, and that was it about the entire setup. But I'm gonna open my terminal right now, I'm going to use like npm run test and then UI. It's going to ask us to install the vtest UI. I'm going to just write like y, so it's going to install the vtest UI right here. And now we have to rerun this command one more time. And here you can see we're not providing any tests, so we have 0 test. So we have 0 pass test, 0 fail test, and 0 total test. Okay, so I'm going to be creating our test file for our button component. So now our setup is successfully done, and now we are going to be writing a unit test for our components. So what I'm going to do is that first of all I want to go into my git ignore file, and we're going to be ignoring the what do we call it, the this folder. We would also need to ignore the rollup.cache, cache, there we go. And also I guess that's going to be fine. So now let me just save my file, and that's totally done. I'm going to also go into my test folder, and inside there we're going to be creating yet another folder for the components, and let's just use our button.test.tsx. And now we are going to be writing a test cases for our button component. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to import React from the React.js. You would also need to import the render and also the screen and fire event from where, from the testing library React.js. Now let me just save this file right now. You would also have to import the button component so that we can test it. And also now let me just use the describe, and for the label I'll just write like button component, And here let's just remove that second from there. And now let me just save my file right now. And here I'm gonna just say like it should, come on, I don't mean to import that, but it should, come on, it should render a button with default styles like so. And here we have to provide our arrow function so that we can test that. So I'll just pass my arrow function right here, pass my render component, and here we have to render our button component to the virtual DOM. And I'll say like click me, and that's gonna be fine. And now underneath there, why we are getting this error? That's because we have to make the disable totally optional. So not here but here. I'm gonna also have to just mark the as disabled optional, and that's totally done. Now underneath there we are going to be getting our actual button, so I'll just use like screen.getByRole, and here let's just paste our button inside there because we are now testing our button component. And I'm gonna also store that inside the button variable like so, and that's totally done. Now let's just provide our expectation first of all. So expect the button to have the text content of click me. And now let me just save my file. I'm going to also provide a few more expectation for the default class names, so whether they have a default class names or not. So I'll just provide like expect, and I'm going to paste my button inside there, and we want to check like to have the class names of background totally blue of 500. I'm going to also duplicate that like a few times, so change that to like background totally white, and also change this one to background beige. Okay, and I'm going to also remove that last one from there. That's totally done. Now here we also have to provide another expectation for our button, and we want it to initially not be disabled by default. So I'll just write like not to be disabled, and I'm going to execute this. So as soon as I do that and save my file, now I'm going to have to run there. But why in the world we are now getting this error? Okay, so it should render the prop. I'm going to go into my button component and search for the base class, and it should be text base, and I'm providing a bg base, so it should be a text base. Now let me just save my file, and hopefully it will work. But now this one is failing, but because this one should be text as well, and now all of our tests are successfully passing. But I'm gonna have to quit there, and I'm going to use like npm run test UI because we want to test that inside the UI. And now let me just refresh there. So here you can see we have one pass test, and we even have just a total of one test. So now our test is successfully passing, and that's something that we want. Now let me just close there. And also I want to open my storybook as well, because later we are going to be also testing our components. So I'm going to use like npm run storybook. So both the storybook and also our test are successfully running. So I'm going to have to copy there from there. Now let me just place that right here, hit enter. And here you can see this is how we are going to be testing our components visually. And this is how we are going to be testing or unit testing our components. So that was our first test. So now let me just collapse them. Now I'm going to write another unit. So we have to use the it once again, and it should render a button with secondary variant. Okay, so here we are going to be also passing our variants today. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just render my button component once again, close there, and god damn it, execute there and pass my button component, which will say like click me. And also we are going to be passing a variance of secondary to there. Now let me just save my file, and underneath there we're going to be still getting our button component, which will be a screen.getByRole, and pass our button inside there. Save this file right now, and here let's just pass our expectation to there. So pass our button to have the class names of background totally gray of 500. I'm gonna also duplicate there, and the text of totally black to them, because now we are testing a secondary variant. Save my file, and now let me just run this. So here you can see we have two test cases, and both of them are now successfully passing. So I'm gonna also hide there, and the next thing that we have to do is that we have to write a test cases for the small button. So I'll just use like it should render, come on, render a small or a button with a small size. Okay, so I'll just pass my arrow function, and here inside there let's just render our component by using that button, and it's gonna say like click me. I'm gonna also paste the size of totally small to there. Now underneath there we have to use like screen.getByRole once again, and we're going to be searching for a button. And now let's store that inside the button variable. And now let me provide my expectation of button to have the class name of text totally small. And now let me just save this file, test this out. So here you can see the small size button is also working. I'm gonna collapse that right here. And now let's just provide another test case. So I'm gonna just duplicate that because it's wasting a lot of our time. So I'm gonna just duplicate that and change this to it should render a button with large. button with large size. So we are now getting our button, and now here for our expectation, I'm gonna just change that to like LG for the larger size, and our test is failing because something is not right. So here you can see we are now providing a size of small, medium, and large, but here we are providing a text of totally large. txt-lg. That's because we are providing a small. It should be a large. God damn it. Now let me just save my file and run there. And our test is now successfully passing. So I'm going to duplicate there yet another time. Duplicate there and change this test to the disable test. So I'm going to change there. It should render a disable button. And here we are going to be passing a disable prop right here. So pass a disable and set that to true like so, and we are now getting our button, but now we have to remove that, and here we have to provide our expectation for the button, and we want that to be disabled and execute that. Now underneath that we are going to be also providing yet another expectation for the button once again, and we want that to have the class names of background totally gray, gray of 300, and I'm going to also duplicate that once again in gray of 600, but it should be for the text. So now let me just save my file, and our test is now successfully passing, and which means like everything is working the way we expect them to work. I'm gonna collapse there. Now we are going to be testing like whether we can provide our own custom styling or not. So can we merge them or not? So like it should merge custom class name with default styles. Okay, so here we are going to be passing our arrow function once again, and I'm gonna first of all render my component like so, execute it, and it's gonna say like click me, lowercase me, and I'm gonna also provide my own class names like custom classes or something like that. And now underneath there we are going to be getting our button, so I'll use like screen get by get by row, and here we have to pass our button inside there, and I'm going to be using like button, and it's going to be equals to this get by role button right here. So I'm going to pass my expectation, and we are checking for the button, and we want there to have the class names of custom class like so. And now underneath there we also want to provide yet another expectation for the button, and to have the class names of background totally blue of 500. Now let me just save there. Now let's just refresh there. So here you can see all of our tests are now successfully passing, which means like we can also specify our own custom styling for our button. Okay, so like if somebody wants to add like new styling to the button, they totally can. And now finally we're going to be also taking care of the children prop. So I'll just provide like it should render a button, or it should render button with correct children text. And here I'm going to pass my arrow function, render my component, and it's gonna say like click, or not click me, but submit would be fine, because we are now testing like we can paste anything to this button, not just a click me or something like that. Okay, so I'll just get my button by using a screen get by role and paste my button inside there. And here we have to paste our expectation like button, and that should have the text content of submit, which you are now passing as a content right here for these children. Check this out. So here you can see all of our tests are now successfully passing. So this is how we are going to be creating our component. This is how we are going to be visually seeing that component, the result of that component, and this is how we are going to be writing a unit test for our component. Okay, so that was about the button component. Now we are going to be creating yet another component for the accordion. So I'm gonna just go to my components folder, and inside there we are going to be defining yet another folder with the name of accordion accordion, and inside there we are going to be creating 3 files. The first one will be for the index.tsx, and then the next file which we are going to be creating will be for the accordion.tsx, and we are going to be also creating one more file for the accordion section. So accordion accordion section.tsx. Okay, so now let's just start from the first one, which is the accordion. Okay, so I'm going to start from the first one, and then we are going to be taking care of the rest of them. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to import my React.js and also the React node from where? From the React.js. Okay, so now let's just do this. Save my file. We would also need to import the CVA from the class variance authority, and we would also need the TW merge from the Tailwind merge. Okay, so next we have to define our component by using the RAFCE, and now this component will take a few props. So it's going to take the children, it's going to also take the variant, variant, and it's going to also take the size. Okay, so we are going to be annotating there by using the accordion props. And I'm going to copy a name of there and define my interface right here. So I'm going to just write like interface with the name of accordion props. And it's going to take the children. We have to annotate there with the React node which we are now importing. And we should also provide the variant which will be totally optional. And the default value we are going to be providing like default. And also the bordered bordered, and also we are going to be providing a size for them, and that's going to be totally optional. We are going to be setting there to either small or large size of accordion. Now let me just save my file, and then totally it about the component. But now we have to specify our class variance authorities. So I'll use like accordion style. That's going to be equals to the CVA. And here we have to pass like the base classes of space on the y-axis will be set to 2, and we also have to specify our own class variance authority object. So inside there we are going to be passing our variant variants, and inside this variance we have to specify a specific variation for this component. So I'll use like variant, and here we have to specify the default, and the default value will be set to background totally white, and we're going to be also providing a border, and the border will be border, and then border, come on, border gray of 300, and also totally rounded large. This can be it for the variant. We also have to specify the size, and the size will be set to small. And for the smaller size we want to set the text to totally small, and also for the large size we want to set the text to be totally large. And now underneath this size we are going to be also providing a default variants, but it should be underneath this one. Okay, so we have to provide our default variants, and inside there let's just paste the default value for the variant which will be set to a default. And also we are going to be passing a size, and the size will be set to totally large. Then said about the accordion style, I'm going to copy a name of the labs there. Now we have to go into our JSX and remove them from there. I'm going to only pass my children's right here, which we are now taking as a props. And here for the class names we are going to be providing our, come on, TW merge first of all, and here we have to pass our accordion styles. And now we are going to be passing our variants and also the size which we are now taking as a props from this component. That's all written about the accordion. Next up we have to go into what do we call it, our accordion section component. Now let's just start working on there. I'm going to go ahead and import the CVI from the class variance authority. I'm going to also import the React.js and the React node. If I can get there today. Oh, we can't, so I'm going to have to write like React node. And also we are going to be using the use state from where, from the React.js. I'm going to save this file right now, push that to the top, and now we also have to import the TW merge from the Tailwind merge. Now we are going to be defining our component right here, and our component will take a few props. So we are going to be providing the children, obviously, and also we are going to be passing the title and the variant like so. Now let me annotate this component by using the accordion section, SECTION section props. I'm going to copy the name of the and create my interface right here with the name of accordion section props, and inside there we have to pass our children, and which will be coming from the React node. I'm going to also provide the title, and title will be set to totally string. We're going to be also providing a variant variant that's going to be set to either a default value or a bordered value. So now let me just save my file. And I'm going to also make the variant totally optional. Like if you want to provide there, you can. If you don't want to provide there, you don't have to. Now we are going to be using the CVA or the class variance authority so that we can get our style. So I'm going to use like const and then accordion section, come on, section styles, and it's going to be equals to the CVA. And pass for the base classes, we are going to be passing like pairing all around of 4. And here inside there we have to pass our variants variants. And inside these variants, we are going to be passing our specific variant, and we are going to be also providing a default one. So for the default, we are going to be changing the background to totally gray of 100, and also we are going to be providing the bordered one. So for the border, we are going to be providing like border only for the bottom, and border color will be set to gray of 300 like so. Okay, so now underneath underneath this one, we are going to be also providing a default variants today. And here we have to pass our variant, and the default will be set to default. Now let me just save my file, and I'm going to also copy this name and collapse that right here. I'm going to go into my JSX and remove that from there. And here inside this JSX, we are going to be using the H2 and paste my title inside there. And also for the classes, I'm going to specify a few classes like flex and justify will be set to like between. Also the cursor will be set to pointer. And here we are going to be also passing, like whenever somebody clicks on this accordion, so in this situation we're going to be firing this function, which is a set is open and not is open, like so, and which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. You have to just bear with me. And you know what, let's just create that right now. I'm going to go there, and here we have to first of all define our state. So I'll use like is open and then set is open. It's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to false. Save my file. That's totally done. Now we also want to wrap that with another div. I'm going to cut that from there, and I'm going to put that right here. And inside this div, you can even change that to a section or something like that. We're going to be using our tailwind merge. So I'll use like TW merge and pass my accordion section right here. And here we are going to be only taking those variants which we are now providing for our accordion section, and we are going to be sending that to our accordion section styles. Now finally we are going to be also providing a span here, and which will just render a few like icons. So if our state is open, so in this situation you want to use this minus or dash, whatever you want to call that. But if that's not the case, we are going to be changing that to this plus icon. Of course you can use the React icon libraries, but in my case I'm not going to. So if this is open, and then we want to use this UI right here. So I'm going to just render this UI, which will be just a simple div, and here we have to just pass our children inside there. Okay, so I'm going to also pass the class names of pairing for the top of 2, and that's going to be it. But if that's not the case, we are not going to be showing nothing at all. So this is how we are going to be building our components. So that's our accordion section component, and that's our accordion component. So now let's just combine both of them inside this index.tsx file. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to export default as the accordion section first of all. From where? From the, let's just go to the top, from the accordion section, and we are going to be also exporting default as the accordion, CORDION. From where? From, let's just go into the accordion component and save my file. So this is how we are going to be creating our accordion component. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to visually test there so that we can see there by using the storybook. Okay, so now let's create our accordion stories file. So I'll just use like accordion.stories.tsx, and now let's just visually test our component. So I'll just import React.js from the React. You would also need to import the type of meta and also story object obj. From where? From the storybook, and then we want to get there from the React.js. You would also need to import our accordion component so that we can test there. We would also need the accordion section component, so we are going to be also testing there. Okay, so now we have to create our meta, and now let me just annotate that with the meta and the type of accordion, like so, and I'm going to also close there. So inside there we are going to be first of all providing the title, and the title will be still going into the components folder, and we want to pass our accordion there. Okay, so here we have to just pass our component, and we want to test the accordion component, provide a comma there, and we are going to be also providing our parameters. So for the layout, you want to set that to centered, and I'm going to save this file right now, but it shouldn't be array, it should be object, like so. I'm going to provide a comma there, and for the tags we are going to be only passing this auto AUTO-TAGS auto tags, or not auto tags but auto docs. There we go. And this is how we are going to be defining our meta, but we are going to be also exporting there by using this same meta. I'm going to also provide a type of story, and it's going to be equals to the story object, and here we have to pass our type of meta and close there. Now it's time to define our first story. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just write like const default like so, and we're going to be annotating there by using this story, provide our args inside there, and use our children. And for this children we are going to be providing our UI. So first of all, let me just provide my React fragments. Now I'll use like accordion section right here in this case, and for this accordion section we are going to be providing some sort of a title today, which will say like section 1. And here inside this accordion section we are going to be providing a paragraph which will say like content for, come on, 4, or just a 4, section 1. I'm going to also make it as uppercase, and now let me just duplicate there a few times. So I'm going to change that to 2, and I'm going to also change this one to 2, and change this one to 3, and also the paragraph to 3. Now let me just save my file, and we are already running there right here. So I'm gonna have to quit there and use my npm run storybook once again. And now we are getting our accordions right here. So we have this accordion, and we can also test this out right here. So we have the border one. If you set that to default, that's going to be the default look. If you click on there, so it's going to show us this content. If you click on there once again, so it's going to hide there. And this is how our border component will look like. This is how the smaller screen will look like, and this is how the larger will look like. Let me just set that to default, and that's our default story right here. No, I'm gonna just click on there, and that's looking cool. Anyways, so now let's just create a stories for their other ones. I'm going to collapse them, and I'm gonna define a story for the border one. So I'll use like const border, and here let's just annotate that with story. And it's gonna be equals to this object, and provide my arguments inside there. Provide the variant, and the variant will be set to border. And here let me just provide a comma and children. And here we are going to be passing our fragments or React fragments. Now let me call my accordion section component, and it's going to take the title. So I'll just pass like, I don't know, maybe section 1 or something like that. We're going to be also passing our variants. So I'll just set that to like border, and inside there we are going to be using a paragraph which will say like content for section 1. Come on. Section 1. I'm going to save this file right now, duplicate that a few times. So this one will be a section 2 still border, and also content for the section 2, content for the section 3, and content for the section 3. Now let me just check this out. So here you can see we are now getting this border accordion component right here, and you can totally customize that if you wanted to. Okay, so that's our second story for the border one. Now we are going to be creating another story for the smaller one, so called small story. And it's going to be equals to this object, provide my arguments inside there, and the size will be set to totally small. And here let's just pass our children inside there, and inside these children's we are going to be providing our fragments, and I'm going to say like accordion section, and here I'm going to also paste the title of like section 1 or something, or what is HTML would be fine, like, oh, you know what, section 1 was fine. I don't want to waste your time. And here let's space our paragraph which will say like content for the section 1, and I'm going to duplicate that a few times. I guess one time would be fine. And here let me just change that to 2 and 2 right here, semi-file. And now if I check this out, so these are going to be basically my small content, but I'm going to also duplicate that once again, change that to 3, and change this one to 3 as well. So this is how the smaller will look like, this is how the border will look like, and that's the default one. Now we are going to be also taking care of another story, which will be the last story and large story. So we are going to be using like export const large, and provide or annotate that with the story, not sorry. And here let's space our args inside there, and provide my size, and the size will be set to large. We're going to be also passing a children, and for these children let's space our React fragments, and I'm going to say like accordion section, close there, paste my title inside there, and I'm going to say like section 1. Inside this accordion section I'm going to paste my paragraph which will say like content for section 1, and I'm going to also duplicate there like a few times. So this one will be content for the section 2, and this one will be content for the section 3, like so. I'm going to save this file right now. If I click on this large one, so it's going to give us this large one, and these are the smaller ones right here. But yeah, that's totally correct. So this is how we are going to be visually testing our accordion component. Next we have to write a unit test for our accordion component. Okay, so now let's write a unit test for our component. So I'm going to go into the test components folder once again, and here we are going to be creating our accordion.test.tsx component, or file rather. And now we are going to be importing React from the React.js. We also have to import the render and also the screen fire event from the testing library React.js. Now let me just save this file. We also have to import the accordion, not the accordion plugin, but accordion accordion and the accordion section, so that we can test both of them. Now we are going to be describing, so let's just use the, okay, so we have to write them manually. So accordion component, that's going to be the message. We also have to pass our callback function today, and here we are going to be using like it should, or it renders accordion correctly, or it should render accordion. It should render accordions correctly. Now we are going to be passing our callback function today. And here inside there, we are going to be first of all using our render method. So let's just use the render, and inside this render method, we are going to be rendering our accordion component. What am I doing today? God damn it, what the hell is wrong with me? Accordion, there we go. And now let me just close there. So inside there, we are going to be also providing our accordion section. And I'm going to also close there. Here we're going to be pasting the title and section 1. Okay, so for this section 1, let me just paste a paragraph which will say like content for section 1. And now let me just save there, or you know what, let me just make the lowercase section 1. There we go. Now this is looking better. Now underneath then, what do we have to do? We have to provide our expectation. So let me just use like screen dot get by text, and not test ID but get by text, and we are going to be passing a section 1. We are going to be getting our item by using this section 1, and we want it to be in the document, and I'm going to execute that. Now underneath we are going to be using their expectation once again. So let's just use the screen get by text and pass our content, which is this same content. I'm going to copy this entire thing from there. Now let me just place that right here, and we want it to not to be in the document. Now let me just execute this, save my file, and I'm going to use like npm run test UI, so it's going to run there. And our test is failing. I don't know why, but we have to figure this out. It shouldn't be get by, it should be query by text. So let's just use a text right here, save my file, and now our tests are now successfully passing. Check this out. Let me just refresh there, and where is that accordion component? There we go. I'm gonna also collapse there. So yeah, this is totally working the way we expect him to work. I'm gonna hide there. Now we have to provide yet another one, and that's gonna be the final one. So it should come on, it should toggle section content visibility, visibility. There we go. And I'm gonna also provide my callback function today, use my render, and here paste my accordion component, close there, paste the accordion section, also close there, like so. And we're going to be pasting the title, so title, and we are going to be providing like section 1 inside there. Let's just paste our paragraph content for section 1. I'm going to save this file right now, and now underneath there we are going to be using our testing library fire event. And here let's just check, like whenever somebody clicks on there, in that situation we are going to be first of all getting item by using get by text and paste like section 1. We are going to be getting there. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to provide our expectation for that, which will be screen get by text, and we have to paste that content like content for section 1, which is the same content. So I'm gonna have to copy that from there. Both of them are totally fine. That's why it is now highlighting, and we want that to be in the document. And now let me just execute there. And now underneath there we are going to be providing yet another expectation. So basically I'm going to just duplicate there, and whenever we click on there once again, so then we don't want that, so then we want to hide that. So like whenever we click on there for the first time, we want to show that content, but whenever we click on there for the second time, then we want to hide there. Let me just test this out. Okay, so this is query by text, and now let me just save there. And here you can see all of our tests are now successfully passing. I'm going to expand there right here, and yeah, this test is also passing, which is looking cool. Okay, so that was it about the accordion component. Like this is how we are going to be building there, this is how we are going to be visually testing there, and this is how we are going to be writing a unit test for there. Now let me just close there, and now we are going to be creating yet another component, which will be for the card. So I'm going to first of all create a new folder with name of card, and inside there we are going to be creating two files in this case. So the first file will be for the card.tsx, and the second file will be for the index.tsx. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to my card first of all, and I'm going to use my arrayfce, save this file, and I'm going to go to the top and import the React from the React.js. Then we also have to import the CVA from the class variance authority, and also the TW merge from the Tailwind merge. Now this component should accept a few props, so we are going to be destructuring this. So it should accept the size, the shadow, the border, children, and also the class name, or just a singular class name. Now we are going to be also annotating there by using our interface. so that we don't get those error or those TypeScript errors. So I'll just write like card props. I'm gonna copy that from there, and let's just define our interface with the name of card props, and inside there let's just provide a size which will be totally optional. Like if you want to provide that, you can, but you don't have to. So we are going to be providing a small size or a medium size or the large size. Okay, and now we are going to be also providing a shadow which will be also totally optional. So either a shadow will be none or smaller or medium or come on or large. So now let me just save there. So that's going to be it for the shadow. We are going to be also providing a border which will be totally optional. So either border none or border solid or border rounded like so. And now underneath there we also have to provide the children which will be coming from the React node. Okay, so now let me just hit enter. So it's going to also import this React node from the React.js. Now underneath there we also have to provide the optional class names. So class name which will be totally optional, and that's going to be set to a string. Now let me just save my file, and that's going to be it for these props. And now let's just use our class variance authority. I'm going to define that right here by using a card styles, and it's going to be equals to the CVA for the class variance authority. So pairing for the all around will be set to 4, totally rounded large, and background totally white, and shadow will be set to totally medium. Now we are going to be also providing our object, and here we have to pass our variants, and inside these variants we are going to be first of all providing a size. So sizes can be different sizes, like small size. Let's just write like small. The size is small, so we are going to be providing like width of 64, and also the height will be set to 48. Let's just use our 48 right here. I'm going to also provide the medium, and the medium will be set to width on 80. Let me just use 80, and the height will be set to 60. But if that's not the case, we are going to be also providing a large, and the width will be set to 96, and the height will be set to 72 like so. Now let me just save this file, and now underneath the size we are going to be also providing a shadow, and let's just use like if the shadow is none, so we are going to be using like shadow none. Or if the shadow is small, so we are going to be using like shadow SM for the smaller shadow. Or if the shadow is medium, so in this situation we are going to be using like shadow MD for the medium. If the shadow is large, so we are going to be using shadow large. And now let me just provide my comma there. Now underneath there we're going to be also providing a border, just a border like so. And here let's space like if the border is none, so we are going to be using like border none. If the border is solid, so in this situation we are going to be using like it should be solid, and border gray of 300. And I'm gonna also provide like rounded, and rounded will be set to border 2, and border gray of 300, and totally rounded large. Now let me just save this file right now, and now underneath there we have to use our default variants, and inside there I'm going to be providing a default size of medium, and I'm going to also provide the shadow of totally medium, and I'm going to also provide the border, and the border will be set to solid like so for the default variants. That's totally done. Now that we successfully write a code for our class variance authority, now we have to use that inside our JSX. So I'm going to just remove that from here, and I'm going to render my children inside there, and now I'm going to also use the TW merge for the tailwind merge. And here we're going to be passing our card styles, so it's going to take those props like size and also the shadow and also the border, and we are going to be also providing our class names to there. Okay, so I'll just use like const merged class names, and it's going to be equals to this TW, and it should be just a class name singular. And now I'm going to copy the name of there, go to my class names, and here we're going to be providing our class names, remove there, and paste my merge class names, and that's going to be here. Now let me just save my file, and this is how we are going to be creating our card component. And this is not going to be the most beautiful looking card component, but yeah, if you want to change the styling of that, you totally can, but you don't have to. Now let me go ahead and go to my index.tsx file, and I'm going to be exporting there by using default from the card component. Now let's just use a card, and I also forgot to export there right here inside. Let me just uncollapse all of them. I'm gonna go into my components folder, and inside there we have our index.ts file. So now we are going to be exporting default as card. From where? From, let's just go to the card. It should be from, there we go. And now if I hold control and click on this, so it's gonna bring us to this card component right here, which is looking cool. And this is how we are going to be building our card component. So now let's just create a story for this card component. So now I'm going to go into the stories folder, and inside there we are going to be creating a new file with the name of card.stories.tsx. And now let's just start working on our stories, baby. So we have to import React from the React.js. We also have to import those types because we are going to be using that. So we have to import the meta and also the story object from where? From the storybook, from the React.js storybook. And we also have to import that card so that we can test that. So let's just use that card. I'm going to save this file right now. Now we are going to be creating our meta. So I'll just use like meta, and I'm going to also annotate that meta with this type of card. Close there, and here inside there we are going to be placing our title, which will be a components, and then card component, which we are now creating right here. Now we are going to be placing our component, and here let's just paste our card right here. And now we are going to be also providing a perimeters so that we can test that. I'm going to use like layout, and we want it to be totally centered. And now underneath there we have to use the tags, and for these tags we are going to be providing the auto docs, so automatically generate a documentation for our component. Now we are going to be exporting default that meta so that we can use that in other file. And now it's time to define our story. So I'll use like story, and it's going to be equals to the story object, and now we are going to be passing a type of meta and close there. Now we are going to be also using like export const small, and story is going to be equals to this object, provide my args or arguments inside there, and I'm going to provide the size, and the size will be set to small. I'm going to also provide the shadow, and shadow will be set to medium, and also for the border what the hell am I doing? The border will be set to totally solid, and we are going to be also passing a children, which will be set to this div, and which will say like small, come on, small card content or something like that. Now let me just save this file. I'm gonna open yet another terminal, and now I'm gonna be using npm run storybook to see there in action. And this is our card component. Now let me just click on there. So now we are getting a card with a lot of variations. So if I click on the medium, so it's going to give us the medium one. If I click on the large, so it's going to give us a large. So if I click on the none, so it's going to remove those shadows. I'm going to make that as a small and provide a bit of shadow to there. You can't see there right now. And here you can see this is how it's going to look like for the medium shadow, and this is how the large shadow will look like. And that was a rounded card. We can also set that to none. We can also set that to like totally rounded one or solid one, and we can provide like our own children for this content as well, and we can also provide our own custom classes if we wanted to. So that was the first story. Now we are going to be defining a few more stories. So now underneath that, let's just use like export const medium and define my story inside there. For the arguments, we are going to be providing a size and provide my medium size in there. I'm going to also provide the shadow, and the shadow will be set to large. For the border, we are going to be setting that to totally rounded, and I'm going to also provide the children, and children will be just a div which will say like medium card content or something like that. Let's just save our file, click on the medium. So this is how it's going to look like. I'm gonna close there. So that's the smaller one, and there's the medium one. Now let me define a few more stories. So I'll just use like export const large story. It's gonna be set to story, and inside there we are going to be providing the arguments. So it's gonna take the size of totally large because we are now building a large story. The shadow will be set to totally medium. The border will be also set to totally none. And I'm gonna also provide the children, and the children, come on, children will be set to div, and it's going to say like large card content right here. Save my file. If I click on the large, so this is how my large card will look like. Now we are going to be creating yet another story for no border. So I'll use like export const no border, and it's going to take a story, and here inside they provide the arguments, and I'll just use like size, and the size will be set to medium. And I'm going to also provide the shadow, and the shadow will be set to medium. I'm going to provide the border and set that to none, and the children will be set to div no border. Come on, border card found or something like that. So now let me just click on the border, and here you can see it will not include any borders. If I click on the medium, so it has this border. If I click on the no border, so it's not going to include any border. Okay, that was a lot of things that I just explained. But now I'm going to also show you like we can also specify more custom content to our card component. So now let me just show you there. So I'll use like export const with custom content, and it's going to take a story. Inside there we are going to be passing the arguments, and let's just use the size. And for this size we are going to be setting there to medium, and I'm going to also provide the shadow, and the shadow will be set to totally large. And for the border we are going to be setting there to totally solid. I'm going to also provide these children's, and let's just test this out. So we can just provide a div, and inside this div I'm going to also specify like h2, and I'm going to say like card title or something like that. I'm going to use the class name, like font will be set to semi-bold, and the text will be set to totally large. Underneath there we are going to be using a paragraph which will say like some content, content inside the card, period. I'm going to also provide the class names of text only small, semi-file. Now let me just refresh there, click on the custom card, and yep, we can totally provide there. You can even also specify some more content like lorem of something, and here you can see this is how my card will look like. So yeah, that was it about the card component, and this is how we are going to be writing a stories for there. But next we are going to be writing a unit test for our card component.